Good evening, everyone. It is August the 6th. It is 5 p.m., and I'd like to welcome everybody to the Brevard County Commission meeting. And with that, I'd like to call this meeting to order and just ask that you take a moment of silence, please. Commissioner Smith?
Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we have no minutes for approval, so resolutions. Commissioner Smith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to invite the folks from the Florida Wildlife up to the podium. You're going to do this all by yourself? Can they come up? Sure, absolutely. They came all this way. They should get some recognition. All right, while you're getting settled there, I'm going to read this, and then I'll give you the floor. Whereas, one act of compassion caring for an injured wild animal way back in 1973 evolved into taking care of sick and injured animals from home, accepting native and migratory wildlife without tax support from the state or city. And whereas, in 1998, the Florida Wildlife Hospital and Sanctuary opened their doors as a nonprofit organization dedicating its time to Florida wildlife in need of rehabilitation without any tax support from the state, cities, or county. The majority of funds are derived from donations. And whereas Florida Wildlife Hospital and Sanctuary's mission has remained the same, to aid injured, sick, and abandoned wildlife and return them to their place in the ecosystem. And whereas in 2008, a 100-foot-long bird of prey flight building was added for the rehabilitation of larger birds. This facility is made available to other rehabilitation organizations to provide the best care to as many patients as possible. And whereas Florida Wildlife Hospital and Sanctuary uses ambassador animals to provide educational programs for school groups and the public, and offers rewarding volunteer opportunities to the public. And whereas Florida Wildlife Hospital and Sanctuary works closely with the Brevard Sheriff Animal Control, Florida Fish and Wildlife, as well as other wildlife rehabilitators and animal welfare groups in the state, and dedicates thousands of volunteer hours rescuing and rehabilitating local wildlife. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, proclaims August 6, 2019, Florida Wildlife Hospital and Sanctuary Foundation Day in Brevard County, and urges all citizens to help protect wildlife through education and awareness. Done, ordered, and adopted in regular session this 6th day of August, 2019. Madam Chair, I move to approve this resolution.
I'll second it as long as we can hear from the owl.
Motion by Commissioner Smith, second by Commissioner Lober. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you so much. I'm not sure if he's going to talk, but this is Oliver, our great horned owl, one of our many ambassadors that go out to programs and teach people about the amazing wildlife that lives in Florida. We really, really appreciate this honor. We work really hard in many different areas to try to help wildlife, from rehabilitating and releasing to educating people, to going out and doing cleanups. We try and get it from all angles. We do see about 5,000 patients a year. That's a lot. We are already up to almost, actually over 3,700 for the year so far this year, so it's going to be a big year. And if we get a named storm, that makes it go up even more. Our volunteers did clock in over 16,000 hours of volunteer time last year, so that is a huge part of why we can help so many animals, because of our amazing volunteers that we have as well, many of which are here today. Thank you for coming. We have a great board. We have a very tireless staff, and donations are always helpful. We survive on donations, memberships, fundraising events, and then characters like this here. So we do appreciate very much the acknowledgement, and thank you for having us.
Tracy, would you like to tell? Excuse me. Would you like to tell us a little bit about the owl and how it became an ambassador?
Do you want to take that part?
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I can do it without a microphone. All right, so my name is Chelsea, I'm the assistant director. Oliver here came to the hospital back in 2011 as a young bird, very, very young. We believe he fell from his nest. If you guys notice, his right wing is drooping slightly. He does have a permanent injury on his wing that prohibits him from being released back into the wild. He can only fly very, very short distances, so that's why he would not be able to go out into the wild and hunt food for himself. So that's why he came to live with us back in 2011, and he's been an amazing ambassador animal for us, going on many, many programs every year. He's our largest ambassador animal. The great horned owl is the largest owl in the state of Florida. We have 5 different species that are found here. But the cool thing about owls is they can turn their head about 270 degrees to see all the way around them. They have excellent eyesight, excellent hearing. So he's a very big and powerful bird. He doesn't look like he may be very heavy, but after a little while, he starts to feel it in the arm. Does anybody have any questions about Oliver? No?
He's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yes, his name is?
Oliver.
Oliver.
All right. Need all of you to come over here. We'll get some pictures.
Thank you for bringing them to us. It's beautiful, isn't it?
Just in case we have a little, rest stop.
You can get up on the stairs too, that'll help.
Oh, okay.
I feel like Johnny Carson. All right. Ready?
1, 2, 3, and get 1 or 2 more. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Matt, Aubrey, and Abigail. And Mrs. Whitaker and Mr. Fleming, if you'd like to come up too.
Can we bring up Dr. Kish from FIT
You sure can.
and our other 2 administrators, Catherine Hopper and Glenn Webb, because we couldn't do any of this without them.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to read this, and then you can talk a little bit more about it, because I'm sure it's more than what's in this resolution. Whereas 3 West Shore Junior Senior High School students, Matt Kish, Aubrey Teglin, and Abigail Watson, built race cars powered by only a mousetrap with materials donated by Florida Tech and under the supervision of teacher Jill Whitaker. And whereas the students raced their cars in a local competition where they were judged on acceleration, endurance, innovation, and creativity, as well as developing an instructional video on how to build a mousetrap car. And whereas the results of the races, including times, car specifications, and pictures, were sent to a judging committee in the city-state of Monaco on France's Mediterranean coastline, where scores were compared with those of students from around the world. And whereas Matt Kish, Aubrey Teglin, and Abigail Watson were chosen by the committee to compete in the Monaco Mousetrap Car Grand Prix 2019 in Monaco. And whereas Matt Kish, Aubrey Teglin, and Abigail Watson traveled to Monaco in May, where they not only raced their mousetrap cars, but also met Prince Albert of Monaco, watched the Formula One Monaco Grand Prix from the VIP grandstands, and visited the Formula One pit lanes and met the drivers. And whereas at the Monaco Mousetrap Car Grand Prix, Aubrey Teglin and Abigail Watson placed 2nd in acceleration and 3rd in the video competition, and Matt Kish took 2nd place in the video category. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, does hereby recognize and commend Matt Kish, Aubrey Teglin, and Abigail Watson for proudly representing West Shore Junior Senior High School with outstanding performance at the Monaco Mousetrap Car Grand Prix. Done, ordered, and adopted in regular session the 6th day of August, AD 2019. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Lober, second by Commissioner Smith. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Congratulations, guys. Would you like to say a few words or tell us more about?
Yes, please. So I am Matt Kish, this is Aubrey Teglin, and this is Abigail Watson. And we are the West Shore Wild Traps. So first and foremost, I'd like to thank you guys for having us. And I'd also like to thank our amazing administration for supporting us 100%, and FIT for financing the whole thing. So my family first heard about it because we were on a family trip in Europe, and we got to actually meet the founder and sponsor of the race. And so we came back and we told Miss Whitaker about it because we knew she would be the perfect fit. I know she would sponsor it 100%, and she did. And she told the administration about it, and they were 100% on board from the start. So we got the supplies and we got to work. Now, she told her class about it, her 8th grade class, and these two were ready to sign up. And so we got the parts, and I got to make the video, and she also made a video too. And we did our little trial run at the FIT gym, and the sponsor, Marco Casaraki, actually came to our event because he was in town. And I think he saw something in us or something. But we made it to the finals. So we got to go on a plane and go to Monaco and see the sights and compete in the competition.
Against the other countries you compete
Against Italy and France and a whole range of countries. And they ended up placing 2nd place, which was amazing. And we got to compete in the video competition, and I got 2nd place and they got 3rd place, and yeah, it's just amazing.
I think it's pretty incredible and a heck of an accomplishment. I mean, this is your first year doing this, and look how far it's incredible. Imagine what you're going to do next time.
I know.
Can't wait, and we'll recognize you again.
This was the first time a school went and placed the first year they were there.
Wow, that's incredible. Well, it's a testament to your hard work and the support of your school and FIT, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
We'll have you back, Matt. Yes. I think Matt's been hired as the next public speaker when we need one. Most people shy away from it, so I appreciate you. Commissioner Pritchett?
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Kevin Schroesfire, if you would come forward, please, sir. All right. Whereas the Florida Water and Pollution Control Operators Association, organized in 1941, a nonprofit trade organization that promotes the sustainability of Florida's water utility industry through workforce development, to protect the health of Florida citizens and to preserve the state's water resources. And whereas the organization offers water and wastewater treatment plant operator and water distribution system operator training courses required for the state of Florida operator license, 8 voluntary certificate programs and continuing education programs for the operator license renewal. And whereas the Florida Water and Pollution Control Operators Association recognizes all those who have played a significant part in operating and maintaining our drinking water, wastewater, stormwater systems in Florida by celebrating Florida Water Professionals Month, which applauds their consistent efforts to protect our health and environment 365 days a year through sunshine and catastrophe storms. Now therefore be it resolved that the Brevard County Board of County Commissioners does hereby proclaim August 2019 as Florida Water Professions Month in Brevard County. Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve this resolution this 6th day of August.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Pritchett, second by Commissioner Lober. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Commissioners. On behalf of, as the Director of Region 7, Region 3, as the Director of Region 3 of the Florida Water Pollution Control Operators Association, FWPCOA, I want to thank you all. FWPCOA is an organization of over 5,000 members. I think we're roughly about 5,400 members right now statewide of wastewater, stormwater, drinking water operators, directors, field workers, et cetera, you name it. We're the employees behind the scenes, keeping your water, stormwater, drinking water, wastewater all clean and environmental clean for the citizens and environment of the county and state. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Commissioner Lober?
Great. Can I have anyone who's here with Merritt Island High come up? I like that, well represented.
I love the colors.
Yeah. So I was looking forward to this one, actually, because we had a resolution in the same district on another set of satellites that was launched on the same rocket by Taiwan. So I think it's cool we have, multiple wins on the same rocket here. So resolution, and I'm not going to butcher everyone's names, but could we, I guess, real briefly, if the chair will allow, could we have everyone just introduce themselves?
Aaron Jevett, former student. Nathan Stevens, former student. Alex Jevett, mentor.
Jessica Belair, student.
Margaret Jennings, former student.
Tracy Beatovich, teacher.
Sean Daly, NASA.
Javier Baez, former student.
Calvin Ruiz, NASA mentor.
Renan Famoso, NASA mentor.
James Raymer, principal. All right. So resolution reads as follows. Whereas the Merritt Island High School STANGSAT Club designed, developed, programmed, and tested a CubeSat that was launched into space on June 25th, 2019, giving students a rare and exciting opportunity working with NASA and California Polytechnic Institute, San Luis Obispo. And whereas over 80 Merritt Island High School students were involved in this endeavor over the years, including current club members Jessica Belair, Caleb Hubbard, Aaron Niazi, Henry Pinero, Christopher Stevens, and Caden Widrick. And whereas the team also included many alumni of Merritt Island High School, including, and there are so many, I'm just going to refer to the resolution. I did notice there were some Bryans in there, so I was happy to see that. Whereas STANGSAT has had teacher sponsors, and I'll do the same, we'll just reference that to the resolution. Whereas STANGSAT has had immeasurable support from NASA's Launch Services Program with mentors and sponsorship, and whereas the team has designed and built 2 CubeSats, a test unit that launched in June of 2013, and the flight unit that launched in June 25th of 2019 on a Falcon Heavy rocket, and whereas the project has been supported by the community through family, friends, and businesses since 2011, now therefore be it resolved that the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, does hereby unanimously commend and recognize the Merritt Island High School STANGSAT team for the STANGSAT satellite, done, ordered, and adopted in regular session the 6th day of August 2019. Motion to approve.
Motion by Commissioner Lober, second by Commissioner Pritchett. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
All right, so I'm really hoping someone will tell us how this happened.
Well, we'll get there, but I did want to say thank you very much for this recognition, and also to thank NASA Launch Services Program and all our wonderful mentors for this awesome experience for the students. How it came about was NASA came to the school board and said, hey, we want to, and correct me if I'm wrong, to build a CubeSat with one of your schools. Merritt Island was picked, and so over the last 8 or 9 years, we've been working on a CubeSat. We launched the one in 2013, and then we learned some stuff, and we built another one, and Falcon Heavy was picked, and after many, we were kicked off a couple, and then we got this one, and it was just so exciting and just incredible opportunity to build a satellite at the high school level on the Space Coast and launching the same year as the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11. I mean, it is just awesome.
I've got to ask, did everyone stay up for it? I know it got kicked back from about 11:30 to 2:45.
We were there. We stayed up. We were
so
there.
Everyone, no one?
Yeah.
All right, perfect.
So, anybody want to? Oh, and it worked. Yeah, and we're getting data down, and NASA's looking at it, and the data measures the shock and vibration of the rocket for future CubeSats, so they know how strong to build it, so they don't waste money. If it's too strong, you've wasted some money. If it's too weak, it breaks, and you've wasted money. So it's kind of
awesome.
Very valuable information.
Thank you guys so much.
Well, share your progress with us. Keep us up to date on it. It's exciting. Yeah.
And the students are supposed to get in there. Oh.
Okay, moving right along to our consent agenda.
Move to approve.
Second.
I don't have any cards, so I have a motion to approve consent agenda as written, and by Commissioner Lober, a second by Commissioner Pritchett. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay. Item G, public comments. I have 2 cards, and again, public comments and items will be 3 minutes. Mr. Sanjay Patel. And after Sanjay, we have Sandra Sullivan. Just name and address, or name and city for the record.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Sanjay Patel. I live in Satellite Beach. So I heard that a biosolids ban might be coming up at the next commission meeting on August 20th. So I had a couple questions. First, let me first start by saying that I 100% support a ban on biosolids distribution in Brevard County. Both the recent algal bloom in Lake Washington, as well as the hepatitis A outbreak in our county, many residents are wondering if they're somehow related. I did want to get some clarification about a recent bill, HB 829, which all of our state legislators voted for, and it was passed this year, and how it might impact any moratorium that you set here. According to the Florida Phoenix, and I'm going to quote here, HB 829 actually bans local governments from passing stronger ordinances to restrict the land application of biosolids. The State Department of Environmental Protection is only just now setting some new state requirements for sludge spreading. Once those state regulations are done, that's it. State law applies everywhere, and locals who might want tighter rules be damned. So is this accurate? And is it possible for the county attorney to let us know the impact of HB 829 and whether or not we would be able to ban biosolids in Brevard County? And if we are able to get a moratorium passed, would it be preempted as soon as those Department of Environmental Protection rules are finalized this year? So hopefully the attacks on home rule by some of our legislators haven't irreparably damaged our ability to pass a moratorium here locally. So thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Briefly.
Commissioner Lober?
Just real briefly, you are correct in that it is set for this coming commission meeting on the 20th. I will tell you, I've not had a chance to speak with the county attorney about the applicability or lack thereof with respect to the House bill, but certainly prior to that meeting, I'll speak with her, and to whatever extent we can ban them, that's what I'm attempting to have done. So it may be lesser or greater. I've just not had a chance to quite honestly prep with respect to the application of that particular item. Yes, sir.
Good evening. Sandra Sullivan, South Patrick Shores. I would like to ask your help to protect the St. John's and our drinking water with your advocacy. This includes immediate action to install a Kilroy for real-time monitoring that will give us the algae monitoring. Also, the ban on biosolids and protect our floodplain and wetlands from development. Since the last time I was here, I held up a bottle of 2 tests done in Satellite Beach and South Patrick Shores of the coliform bacteria, and biosolids are associated with the coliform bacteria, and they're also associated. They're Class B biosolids we're talking about, associated with pathogens as well. And as Mr. Patel mentioned, the Hep A is being 2 maps over top, show there may be a correlation. So since I was last here, we found out that we had an algae bloom, and then Melbourne Water wasn't honest with us. And it went nearly a month with people being exposed. One person in my community in South Patrick Shores was hospitalized for respiratory failure. This is a very serious health concern for all of you, that we address this and really put a lot of attention into some real solutions. So we have to find ways to prevent and have more responsive to when an algae bloom is there. Lake Washington doesn't normally have it, and it's understood that biosolids are fueling that. So somehow, I think I saw a discussion in Florida today that they were thinking about a slow implementation, and that won't work. I mean, I'm worried about the rain right now. And so I don't know if you guys saw, we have issues with the water system anyway. And in my area, we have almost no chlorine in our water. And so when they started injecting heavy chlorine and ozone, my bath water, I ran it. There's a there's a Facebook video out there. It's had thousands of views. It looked like a cesspool. And I just lost it. If our water's not safe, we need to be told, and I would like you guys to work with Melbourne Water about their integrity and telling people when the water is not safe, tell them. As stinky smell, they stood up there and told us that the water was safe and that it was our pipes at our house that the stinky smell, and it was geosmin that goes hand in hand with the algae bloom. And one more thing, I talked to a cyanobacteria expert, a PhD. She told me that the DEP is not sampling the lake correctly, that the microcystin goes throughout the water column, and so they're only going to one depth. They may not be picking it up. So it's a health and safety issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. Commissioner Lober?
Just real briefly on that, and again, I'm not going to pretend I have scientific expertise beyond what I do, but having had a reef fish tank for God knows how many years, I can tell you that what you're saying makes a lot of sense insofar as potentially having a link between biosolids and the algae. The fact is that biosolids, if you look at them, the nicest way I can put it is it's the end product of sewage treatment that is dehydrated and condensed into a more solid form. So you're talking about essentially concentrated fertilizer. And if you look at algae, it needs a few things in order to grow. It needs either a phosphorus containing or a nitrogenous compound that it can break down and make use of in order to grow, and it also needs some light. So obviously we have the light out and about, and the biosolids themselves do nothing but ramp up the nutrients in the body of water. So I do have that concern as well, and I appreciate you coming in.
Thank you. And not just the algae bloom that it's fueling, but also the risk to human health because of the pathogens and coliform. There have been many people who have tested their water in the last few months and found coliform bacteria in our water. And they had the audacity to throw back at us that, oh, it's our testing. What, all of us on these test kits that we get from Lowe's and Home Depot that are designed to test for coliform, we're all wrong?
I can tell
the
you that.
lies, I'm asking you guys to advocate for our health and not just the banning of biosolids, but it goes beyond that. When people get hospitalized and people are on antibiotics and their kids get sick, we can deal with a lot of things, but, having safe drinking water is essential to our lives. And if it's not safe, at least let people know so they have the option to go out and buy water.
And just on that front, when you look and you actually see the published agenda, you'll notice on the actual agenda item for this on the 20th,
yes,
the possibility of the presence of pathogens is absolutely explicitly there. So it is something I am concerned about. But as I said before, I don't have the expertise to tell you to any degree of scientific certainty exactly what the risk level is, but I promise you those are questions that are very likely to come up on the 20th.
I've sent you a video by the DEP that talks about that there are pathogens in it. This is even documented by the DEP, and I think Dr. Burrell said even pigs don't drink from where they defecate. Even Dr. Burrell said that. And we're putting biosolids next to our drinking water. Are we nuts? Thank you.
Makes sense. Thank you.
All right, moving on to public hearings. We have item H1. And this is, do you want to go ahead? Go ahead.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. This is a request tonight for the board to consider adopting an ordinance that would rescind the economic development tax exemption for 3 companies that no longer qualify for the county's program. We have sent certified letters to each one of the companies notifying them of this action that may be taken, and we've also notified the EDC.
Move to approve.
Motion by Commissioner Lober, second by Commissioner Smith. I don't have any cards. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay, item H2.
This item is a TEFRA hearing to allow bonds in the amount of $15 million to be issued for the Viera Charter Schools. This does have a required script for the chair to read.
And just so we're clear, this is not the county taking these bonds out for $15 million, nor are we financially responsible for that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and open the TEFRA hearing. This is a hearing for the purposes of the Federal Tax Equity and Fiscal Responsibility Act, referred to as TEFRA, as required by Section 147F of the Internal Revenue Code of 1986, as amended regarding the possible issuance by the Capital Trust Agency of one or more series of its educational facilities revenue bonds, Viera Charter Schools, Inc. project, in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $15 million.
Excuse me, there needs to be a polling of the audience to see if anyone has any comments.
Okay, is there any person that wishes to speak for or against the bonds of this project to be financed thereby? And has anybody received any written communications?
No, ma'am.
No.
Okay. All right, then I'll close the public hearing. And any discussion on commission?
Make a motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Pritchett. Second by Commissioner Smith. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. And again, the county's not taking responsibility for those bonds in any way, shape, or form. All right, unfinished and old business. Item I1.
All right, I'm happy to introduce it, or we can do some public comment first, whatever preference of the commission is.
I have one public comment card, so I would
Whatever
prefer
you like.
if you introduce it, or
Okay.
since this is your item.
Okay, so the short of it is this was a holdover from the last commission meeting, well, 2 commission meetings ago, a general commission meeting. I was concerned coming up, we have a term that's expiring on the 7th, so it's tomorrow on TICO. I'll just put out there, I've not been on the commission long enough to have as strong a grasp on TICO as some of the other folks that are here. So given that it's in D1, I was hoping the D1 commissioner might opine and give me a little bit of, I guess, info in terms of what her preference is, and then Commissioner Smith as well, since I believe he has a vote on it as well. I've spoken with Colonel Hasley. I've spoken with some other folks that are interested in serving on there. Quite frankly, they're all very good folks. If the interest is in keeping it as it is, I'm happy to do that. I have no concerns with the folks that are on there. If the interest is switching it out and having some new blood, again, they're good folks that are willing to serve, and I'm happy to go either way. I just need a little direction because this is something that's a bit atypical or alien for me. But I do see the Colonel here, and I do see some other folks from Tyco as well. So if you could kind of let me know where you're at and what your thoughts are, it would be very helpful.
Commissioner Lover, are you wanting to discuss other things along with this, or is this the item?
Well, I guess the portion that is implicit in that, at least to a degree, is obviously there has been some negative media coverage, and I don't know to what degree that concerns you and to what degree you think that ought to be considered, if at all, in evaluating what we need to do. But again, I can tell you I've met folks that are interested in serving, and I've met folks that are on there, and they all seem to be very solid individuals. So I'm willing to go in whatever direction you think is appropriate on this one.
Okay, we're going to, Commissioner Pritchett said we'll go ahead and listen to public comment, and then she'll comment. Jerry Sansom?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Jerry Sansom, Rockledge. I'm the chairman of the Titusville Cocoa Airport Authority, and I'm just here for information in case anything came up today that y'all needed any background on or whatever. And we've tried to stay out of y'all's hair as best we can. I know there was a time in the past when we were on your agenda most of the time, or there was even a point in the past when y'all were scheduling workshops that you had trouble getting the commissioners to. So hopefully that's all passed. And like I said, and Dr. Hosley is here. He's a very solid member, and I would hope that y'all would reappoint him to this position. I don't even want to take all the time to explain how extensive his experience is, and he is critical to our team. And also our CEO, Mr. Michael Powell, is here to answer any questions that you may have. He's a good Marine and a very solid person that keeps our airport afloat. And with that, Madam Chairman, I'd be glad to quit.
Okay, how long has that board member been on the board?
Dr. Hosley, I think probably 3 terms.
Okay.
But, you know, like I look at it in any business, you wouldn't want to get rid of your most experienced employee just because they've been there a little while, if they're doing their job and they're an asset and they're doing a good job. And that's the way I consider Dr. Hosley. He's got management experience that the rest of us can only dream of.
And then, like I said, I don't have any concerns about the folks that I've spoken with, so I'm willing to go in whatever direction you're willing to go. I just don't feel comfortable, based on the limited experience that I have, pushing this too strongly in one direction or the other, unless I know where you all are on this.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
So here's my thoughts on it. I love these 2 men that are asking for this position. I've known Dr. Hosley probably 25 years now, and Mr. Mount, I've probably known him 15 to 20 also. You can't make a mistake with either of these men. These are great men, smart men, passionate men, and I have great admiration for both of you guys. At this time, though, I'm thinking the better fit might be Mr. Mount, because he's willing to do it for a while, and he's really good with this expertise. And while you still have a board that's pretty substantially been the same board, I think it's a good time to make that change. So that would be, I think, where I would like to go. But again, neither of these men would be a mistake on this board. They're both great men.
And I'm happy to support you on that. I would note, though, if we go in that direction, I don't want it to be seen in any way as a slight to the Colonel. As I said, I have nothing but good to say about him as well. I'm not saying it to be pleasant. I really mean that. We sat down and talked at length, and I took up quite a bit of his day. So, you know, I'm happy to go whichever way. And I know that Commissioner Smith obviously is a vote on this as well. So I'm curious to see where you're at with it.
Well, like you, both of you, I've spoken to both of these gentlemen at length. I've taken into consideration Mr. Jerry Sansom's opinions, and in fact, I tried to call him this afternoon, but his phone wasn't working, wasn't accepting calls for whatever reason. Maybe the weather had something to do with that. I agree. I don't think that we can go wrong with either one of these folks, but I understand where you're coming from. With some new blood on the board, it might make a difference. So for that reason only, and like you said, Commissioner, that it's not a slight to whoever we don't pick, because they're both very, very qualified, but I'll go along with your idea and support Mr. Mount.
I'll go ahead and make a motion then, in accordance with that.
Okay, my second.
And just so the public's aware, this is a board member appointed by these 3 districts. Commissioner Tobias and myself don't have an appointment to this board. I'll just say that, just give you my 2 cents, I think that probably is a good idea, only because we've been talking about term limiting some of these boards and why we have some talented people. I think fresh eyes are good, fresh ideas are good, and there are some concerns with the airports. I mean, I'm not saying that it's a perfect system in any way, but when we saw that there was a problem with Valcario, we took charge, we took care of it, we did the audit, and we made some changes that put it in the right direction. So maybe a fresh set of eyes and ideas and critique will be good for the board. So
Well,
I think it's a good decision.
One of the other things, if I could just chime in real quickly, I was looking at possible ways to have them both involved on the board, and I asked Mr. Mount when I spoke with him about the possibility of his filling the Titusville spot when that opens up. The problem is he's involved in another board, and they have a policy in place, at least as he explained to me, that prohibits individuals from serving on more than one board. So essentially, there was really no way to split the baby and get, a BOGO, so to speak.
All right. So I have a motion by Commissioner Lober, a second by Commissioner Smith or Pritchett?
Pritchett, I believe.
Pritchett. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. And that's the appointment of Mr. Mount? Mount. Okay, just so we're clear. All right.
And it's done with 2 N's for the clerk staff. Thanks.
Okay, item I2. I'm assuming this is Commissioner Tobias?
Yes, Madam Chair.
It's not on the agenda, whose it is on the public's agenda, but yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The board had previously called a workshop that got postponed. This was dealing with a number of the recommendations that came out of my office concerning that. Obviously, sans the Historical Commission, which has been dealt with one way or another. So I first of all want to thank Kathy Wall in the County Manager's Office for her exceptional work and detailed product. I've formally recognized her before for going above and beyond, and she continues to impress with her quality of work. I understand cutting certain advisory boards may sound harsh, and I'm sure that there are a lot to do with why we have so many. Trimming the fat of boards that have little or no function does not limit participation. If it is the board's desire, we don't even have to lose a single member on any of these boards. We can simply consolidate them, because we can either expand membership or centralize boards or allow certain boards to create subcommittees like the TDC and the EDC does. In fact, by streamlining and consolidating our advisory boards, we will be making them more efficient because they won't be drowned out in all the white noise. We also need to ensure that those who take the time and volunteer are not wasting their time by applying to advisory boards that rarely or if ever meet. To illustrate how bloated our advisory boards have become, our neighboring counties all have less advisory boards than us. While Brevard County has 65, Indian River only has 32. Volusia County has 31. Orange County, which has twice the population, has 9 less boards than what we have. So I passed out a spreadsheet, and I wanted to deal with, first of all, some cuts to boards, then potentially a new one that we had a citizen bring to our attention, as well as some consolidation. Does everyone have the sheet that I handed out in the?
Oh, it's the one that's in our packet?
Yeah, the one, yes. And it's no different with the exception of the Historical Commission. It's come to my attention that the County Emergency Medical Service Advisory Council is dealing with a potential agreement between two hospitals.
Yeah.
So it's become a little bit more active
Yes.
than in the past, and is now serving a pretty vital function that had not been in the past. On top of that, the Brevard County Health Facilities Authority has a responsibility, though there is no staff cost, with some bonds. So that one as well probably needs to be pulled off the list that I provided. Thus leaving three to deal with. Those would be the Emergency Medical Service Review Committee. It looks as though that there's very little that this board does, and consulting with staff, it could be reconstituted should there be a need of certificate of public convenience. The other one would be the Brevard Extension Council. This is a legacy. It's redundant. There are only a couple meetings a year, though the board was created almost 50 years ago, and advises, it's one of its main concern is to advise UF professors. I'll tell you, as a professor myself, one of the last thing you ever want to do is advise a professor. So I think this one has probably served its time. We would see a savings of a little over $1,200. And the big one on here is the Art in Public Places. That one has a staff cost of almost $7,900. It appears as though under new leadership, the TDC is taking on a larger role, and this could become redundant. The TDC Cultural Subcommittee has expressed a willingness to expand their reach, and this is an opportunity to do that and thus reduce costs. The other ones I wanted to talk about was the work group for innovation and solar energy resources. Someone had come into my office, though I was not necessarily supporting this. I certainly said that those individuals should have the opportunity to make their case for a new board. Their case becomes a little stronger should we get rid of some boards that were either redundant or not used. Further, the plan that I outlined would consolidate the various library boards. If there was a desire to create a subcommittee of the smaller ones, certainly would not be opposed to that, but having a consolidated library board would certainly lead to efficiencies. Slightly more controversial might be a parks consolidation. Some of the advisory boards, of which there are 4, have very similar geographic regions, but that certainly could create some savings. And finally, an EELS consolidation. There are 3 EELS committees, and changing them down to 1 definitely could reveal some sort of cost savings. Once we get through that, the other suggestions that came out of my office were quarterly attendance reports. There have been a couple of instances where advisory board members have not shown up to meetings at critical times, and when it is appropriate to consider a member as having resigned under county ordinance, whatever, there's a couple of them, section 2, 213, and BCC 67, so the replacement can be selected. We don't know that this has happened, and that makes it very difficult on us to make sure a quorum is met. So all this would be is quarterly attendance reports to the offices. Commissioner Lober and Ms. LaSalle have been very appropriately so stringent on term limits, and I greatly appreciate that. It's important that ideas do not become stale. So term limits are one way to prevent this from happening. I think that that's probably something that we need to look at with the bulk of these advisory boards. Another one is dealing with IT, and in all honesty, I think our IT department has jumped on this. This is just a place to have all the boards listed, as well as who's on the boards, the appointing authority, how long the term is, the original appointment date. I believe if this would have been out there all in one area, Ms. Wall would have been able to get through this quite a bit quicker, but more importantly, people that are interested in participating would have one resource where they could go, or more importantly, where we could send them when they called our office, and they could decide which board was the best fit and which one had openings. And one more thing, and this is all our offices put forward nominees. It might be a little bit easier as we look through this to have just a generic common application. So when we brought that forward, most of these folks get confirmed, but it might be a little bit easier, not only the applicant, but on the board members as those come forward. So with the consolidation, the quarterly attendance reports, the term limits, the IT site, and a common application, Madam Chair, I'd like to open that up with your approval to discussion, and whatever comes out of that, make motions to ask staff to move forward to make some of those changes.
Okay, I'm going to go to public comment. I have one public comment card, Ronald Barcher.
Generally, I am opposed to the proposal. There are some boards that I believe that could benefit by being consolidated, but there's others I think that need to remain as they are. This is a traditional approach to encourage citizen participation, and that is what I wholeheartedly support. These advisory boards serve a vital role in local government. The boards not only represent a demographic profile of a community, but also provide for a voice for many diverse interests. Democracy can only be realized when individuals come together across neighborhood and economic lines in making community decisions. Because library advisory boards consist of residents in the area around each library, these board members understand the needs of each particular area. The needs and desires of patrons of the Mim Scottsmore Library are quite different from those of the Melbourne Library. To eliminate this essential point of contact with the residents is only going to hurt the performance and effectiveness of the library. Now, I heard a proposal, let's put all those members together in one board, and 5 times 35 members on a board, you get nothing done. And that, to me, makes no sense. It's much better to keep those boards separate with their smaller number of members. Another thing that I'd like to talk about is the consolidation of Parks and Rec. One thing I believe it's need to understand exactly what these board members do. For example, the board members on the North Brevard Commission on Parks and Rec, which has 39 parks under its description, assigns several of these parks to each one of their members. And on a monthly basis, these members visit every one of those parks. They don't just sit in the board and say, oh, yes, here I am, let's talk about whatever. They actually contribute very worthwhile information, and they give this information to not only the staff for the Parks and Rec, but also to the management. So that's a very worthwhile thing that happens. Consolidation, increasing the workload on volunteers would not be a good thing to do. We've got good government in Brevard. Let's not screw it up. Thank you.
All right, I got one more card. Surprise. Chris Minerva?
It's Minerva.
Minerva? Sorry. You wrote your last name really small.
I'm so sorry.
That's perfectly okay, but I'm sorry for mispronouncing.
Minerva, 5385 Lovett Drive, Merritt Island, Florida. It's just simply put, is there a lot of cost attributed to each of these boards? Myra, or is there cost? A lot of cost?
Yes.
That people get paid, or is this volunteer?
No, the folks that serve generally are not paid to serve. Well, I shouldn't say generally, they're just not paid to serve.
They're not
but there is
paid.
a staff cost in association
Just
with each of
the
them.
costs of operation.
Right.
Okay. Okay, well, I always say that representation is very important to our country from the start of our colonies. And local representation is very important. I can understand that you would understand that yourselves in each of the districts and areas you live in. And what's important to you is based on an egocentric, from center out, how we live. I know we're concerned about others, but we're first concerned about ourselves. When we're in an airplane, what do they say? If the mask comes down, put it on yourself first. Don't put it on somebody else. So I believe that they should be separate as they are. It doesn't cost any more than it has been in the past. Are we that desperate for costs? I thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you. Commissioner Lober?
I'll just jump on and kind of address this as best I can here. Certainly, there's some solid points from Mr. Barger and Mr. Minerva with respect to the benefits of having some of these boards kept separate. Obviously, we have a county that's over 70 miles long from end to end, and I don't know that the folks in Parks and Rec on the north side of the county and the folks in Parks and Rec on the south side of the county that are doing this on a voluntary basis really know a heck of a lot about the parks that are over an hour away. With respect to the libraries, one of the things that I think would be interesting is to look at really whether they're being appointed in the best possible way. Obviously, the library, the bigger library board that is in my district is Merritt Island, and interestingly enough, that's appointed in Tallahassee. We don't even get to choose. So be that as it may, I don't know if it's worth looking at having cities appoint folks to those boards, and if so, how many folks ought to be appointed, and whether it's from a staff perspective rather than a political perspective, better and more cost efficient to keep it the way it is or to consolidate it. I think that's something that I really would want to hear staff input, and that would guide me and influence me rather heavily in terms of what I would be willing to do with that. That said, I think there are opportunities to consolidate some other items and save costs. In particular, the one that I'm supportive of, and I know it's been controversial to a large degree, is consolidating eels. I think that's one where the costs are reasonably high enough that it's worth doing. One of these items that is on the chopping block potentially is a $35 staff cost. And frankly, it's so de minimis and so minute. I'm not concerned about $35, but I am concerned about thousands of dollars. And if we can cut that, I certainly would be in favor of that. As to quarterly attendance reports, I think that's a great idea, presuming that the boards meet at least quarterly. If they meet annually, obviously there's no benefit in a quarterly attendance report. I'm sure that you've contemplated that. As to a common application, I support that as well. If there are motions made on either of those fronts, I'd be happy to support them. But I think that a lot of this, it's not that I'm opposed to it necessarily, but I would really want to hear staff's input from the various departments as to whether or not this is going to create some unforeseen or potentially difficult to foresee problems, or whether this is something that's been tried and failed in the past. I don't feel comfortable making a political decision based solely on the numbers without having more information on some of these items. So I would be potentially open to axing some of these or combining some of these, but apart from eels and consolidating that, I just am not there yet.
Commissioner Smith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, piggybacking on what Commissioner Lober just said, there's an awful lot of boards, and I'm not familiar with most of them. And when I have people coming to my office asking to be appointed to a board, there aren't that many. There aren't that many volunteers. So when I get one, I kind of cherish them because these boards are hard to find people. Now, how important a lot of these boards are, I don't know. But I do know that I'm familiar with Parks and Rec and Library. Those people that attend these meetings are very, very loyal to the boards. They're very loyal to the community. And I think it would be a mistake for us to be tinkering with either one of those, because I think the people that serve proudly, and they're very dedicated in their support of Parks and Rec and library boards. So having said that, what do we do with the rest of the boards? I'm not familiar with them. So if somebody wants to propose some way of looking at these boards to see if in fact they are worthwhile going forward, I'd be more than happy to support that. And I think the idea of attendance reports is a good idea as well, because then we as commissioners, we could look at these boards that we support and see if people are showing up and how important they are.
Commissioner Pritchett?
Thank you, ma'am. Commissioner Tobias, the very first one, Emergency Medical Services Review Committee, I would be in agreement with you to remove that, sir. The other one you mentioned, also the Brevard Extension Office, I think that's appropriate to remove too. Art in Public Places for the TDC, I would request if you wouldn't mind bringing that back after the next meeting, and we'll see what kind of develops with some other things going on, but I think that is an opportunity right there. Libraries, I can't mess with them. I go to our library board meetings sometimes, and they're heavily invested in our area. The MEM Scottsmore, they're very passionate about their library and the Titusville Library. Parks, same thing. Parks and Rec, they're very faithful to that, and they're working real hard. They go visit their parks, take care of their parks, report on their parks. So I'm not in support of that. The ILS, let me give you a couple of thoughts that I have with that, sir. That we keep the main board after talking to staff, and you could take the other two boards and make them a subcommittee board like you were talking about, Commissioner Tobias, under them like the TDC does. And another staff member also recommended maybe taking one person off the other two boards and just moving them up to the top board. So I think those two ideas, if you wanted to do either one of those, I'd be in supportive of that also. So great work on all this, and we spent some time trying to figure out who shows up at them and how active they are. So those things I think are pretty easy to do. The other ones, I think they're attended right now. So that's what I would support, sir, with your recommendations.
Commissioner Tobias?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I know I said it once, I can't say it enough. Kathy Wall spent countless hours going over each and every board, its creation, whether it was an act of the board or whether it was state statute, and the work product was absolutely fabulous. So if you want to learn more about any of the boards, I don't want to know how many hours not only Kathy put into that, but I think the county attorney's office had to juggle statute in order to put that together. And I'll tell you what, there were probably 15 other boards that I thought were worthwhile of ending, but whether it would be state statute or other various reasons, I was kindly told should not be cut. So again, thank you to staff. So I would just like to make a few motions, I think, off of all of this stuff. First of all, I'd like to make a motion to rescind the Emergency Medical Services Review Council per Commissioner Pritchett's recommendation.
Second.
I was
You want
going
to do one at a time? It might be easier. I mean,
Okay.
it might be a little bit more cumbersome, but it'd be easier for the clerk, they're over there shaking their head, to
Wait.
follow, and easier for us to know exactly what we're voting on.
Okay.
Okay,
Sure, Madam
so
Chair.
is that a motion for that?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Tobias, second by Commissioner Pritchett. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Next.
Motion to rescind the Brevard Extension Council, Madam Chair.
Motion by Commissioner Tobias, second by Commissioner Pritchett. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
I would like to have a motion to consolidate EELS while expanding the board with one member of each of the other two committees, and then designate both of the Environmental Endangered Land Recreation and Educational Advisory Committee, and as well as the Environmentally Endangered Land Procedure Committee as subcommittees, Madam
Second.
Chair.
Okay, did you get that? Okay. Motion by Commissioner Tobias, second by Commissioner Lober. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
And finally, Madam Chair, I was hearing some mixed opinions on the libraries, the parks, and the art and public places. I would like to request that we ask staff to look into whether there would be any cost savings, not policy decisions, but cost savings on any of these boards, and bring it back so we can make a determination once we have more information, Madam Chair.
I'll second it.
Motion by Commissioner Tobias for all that, second by Commissioner Lober. And I'll just say, I think that's a good idea, because the only thing, I'm all about cutting boards too, because if you could see my board book in my office, and it's hard sometimes juggling, keeping vacancies filled. But the only thing that concerns me about the Parks Board is that a lot of times these are people who do travel, look at the parks, look at the facilities, report back of what's wrong. And I don't know if that is actually of actual value to the county, if there's people that are actually watching these things. So I'd like to see that as well. Commissioner Smith?
Yeah, I would like to mention too that I wouldn't say a lot of time, but I spend a good deal of time at different parks in my jet skiing. And I've been in many counties around this state, and I've been in many states jet skiing, and I can tell you unequivocally that our bathrooms in our parks are by far way, way, way better than other counties and other states, and just not even measurable. So I'm not looking to step on anybody's toes at Parks and Recreation.
I'm going to refrain from the jokes that were just festering in my brain. Mr. Bate?
Thank you. I just wanted to comment on the creating a system to provide updated information on the boards, the names of board members, who the appointing authority is, and the other information on that list. We have actually completed that, and we do have that internally on the website. There may be one or two items that are not on here yet, but we can have them added fairly easily. I also spoke to the IT department earlier today, and they have selected, they're getting ready to do a purchase order for selection, so we can do this for the external website as well, and transfer the information there, which will make it easier for the clerk as well to have all this information. So commission staffs will be able to easily see who's on each board and when the terms are expiring, which will be a significant improvement over where things were. So the IT staff has been working on that, and I'm pleased to tell you that I think it'll be completed in the near future for our external website, in addition to what we've already done on the internal website.
Commissioner Smith? Are you done? Okay. Commissioner Tobias?
Thank you. A couple more, Madam Chair. I'd like to ask the county, a motion to ask the county chair to have staff liaison give quarterly or annual, depending on the date, meeting reports to all commissioners on attendance records of appointees, or include this information as part of the database being developed.
Did you have in that motion for those committees that are meeting at least quarterly? If you do, I'll second it.
Yeah, get quarterly or annually.
Okay. Second.
Motion by Commissioner Tobias, second by Commissioner Lober. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Madam Chair, if we need to prepare documentation to implement the vote of the board, may we have the chair authorized to execute such resolutions?
So moved.
Okay. Motion by Commissioner Lober.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Tobias. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This one's on term limits. Direct staff to draft resolutions and ordinances as applicable to impose term limits of 8 consecutive years or 10 years in any 16-year period for all appointees designated by the board for which there is not an ILA or MOU or contractual commitment precluding imposition of term limits on where the board is preempted, where the board is preempted by state statute. Term limits would not apply to those appointees of entities other than the board, though where possible, the option shall be left to the appointing authority, Madam Chair.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Tobias. Commissioner Lober?
May I direct a question to our attorney?
Sure.
Any concerns on that, or I'd like to support it. I just want to make sure I'm not putting my foot where it shouldn't go.
I think we're going to have to look at the existing ordinances and align some things.
But that's, I guess the motion contemplates it coming back.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
if that's the
draft.
case, yeah, I'm happy supporting it, knowing that it's going to come back. That's fine, I'll second it.
Okay, second by Commissioner Lober. Commissioner Pritchett?
Yeah, didn't we already have this discussion a while ago that we were going to do this except on boards where we had trouble appointing, and then we would go ahead and allow a little bit more leeway for the appointing commissioner? So we've already kind of done this, haven't we?
You've done it on a couple of different boards.
Okay.
I don't think there's been a uniform advisory board amendment at this point.
Okay, so maybe we can make that motion just board-wide that we did before?
We can work on that.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Sounds like county staff has already done most of the IT work as suggested. Thanks for that. And then finally, motion to direct staff to develop a short form and a long form application. Hopefully we'll use it, but at least it'll give us something to work off, Madam Chair.
Second.
Wow. Motion by Commissioner Tobias, second by Commissioner Pritchett. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are you done making motions? You sure?
Yes.
Okay.
You've been doing pretty well. You may want to throw a couple more on there.
All right. Item I3.
And while she's getting situated, I'll just go ahead and move to approve because I know what's going on with this one.
I have a card too.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Good evening, Commissioners. Item I3 is requesting the board approve and accept the final recommendation from the Selection Committee to award a 3-year term contract to RSM and Carr Riggs and Ingram to provide the internal auditing services to Brevard County Board of County Commissioners. Authorize the chair to execute the resulting contract upon review and approval by the County Attorney's Office and Risk Management Office, and authorize the county manager or designee to execute all contract renewals.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Lober, second by Commissioner Pritchett.
We have the.
And I have a card.
yeah.
Mr. Chet Ellsworth.
At the time.
Yeah, I want to address the Chet Ellsworth, 989 North Highway A1A, Indialantic, Florida. I want to address the $1.5 million auditing services contract that appears to me like it has a conflict of interest there. And the fellow over there mentioned Carr Riggs, but this started out as RSM US, and apparently it's RSM US and Carr Riggs now as of very recently. And there is an apparent conflict of interest, of which, in interest of time, I would just ask you to table it until something can be investigated on it. Now, these types of conflicts of interest can be resolved. And you folks are the legislative body of this county. You have the right to regulate the people that are performing or that are involved with these conflicts. I'm just telling you that there's one here. And it may cross into some pending litigation if it's not careful, if you're not careful with this. Thank you.
Having heard nothing specifically articulated, my motion's going to stand.
And I'm not sure what they're talking about. I mean, it's hard. It's kind of cryptic. Anybody else have any other input? Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Lober, second by Commissioner Pritchett. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay. Item J1.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is legislative intent and permission to advertise changes to Chapter 122 waterways. There are new slow and idle speed zones proposed in the St. Johns River near at the 192 overpass for safety zones. This is near Camp Holly and where the Sweetwater Airboat Club reside. This has been coordinated through the Brevard Marine Advisory Council, the Brevard County Airboat Club, and staff has coordinated with state and local law enforcement on the need for these zones. Additionally, we would like permission to advertise legislative intent to clean up outdated portions in the Waterways Code. It hasn't been reviewed since 1996, and there were a lot of zone changes, federal and state mandated zone changes in the Indian River Lagoon that conflict with what's in the outdated code.
I have a card. Do you want to speak first, or?
Either way, I think he's in support of it. The same gentleman that's referenced in the agenda item.
Kurt McKinney? Come on up.
Thank you, Madam and the Board.
Name and city.
Curtis
or
McKinney, Camp Holly Airboat Rides, West Melbourne, Florida.
Okay.
We just got a problem out there. I mean, we all know that we got 365 days a year. We got 104 party days. Melbourne's changed. It's just getting more full. It's dangerous there. I don't really want to drag no kids out of no boats. I don't feel like dealing with it in my front porch. And I really don't want to be on Channel 9 News or somewhere going, hey, there's an airboat wreck at Camp Holly. It's really not my airboat wreck. Most of all, I'm worried about my property being damaged. I'm worried about my boats being slammed up. There's just been nothing there since they built the new bridge. And I don't know when the bridge was built, but I can tell you it's probably been 15 years that we've done nothing there. And most of this is all Florida statute. Every bit of it is just, it's supposed to be enforced. FWC's picked up a really chicken way. St. John's Water Management's picked up a chicken way. I mean, I've been advocating this with Matt since 16. I've seen some of you on the board about the situation. There's a killing coming. It's coming. I don't know when it's going to happen, but I'm telling you, it's going to happen at that intersection right there. You got a lot of people that has a lot of boats, average boat $60,000. They used to be $5,000. People come out on the weekends and they're going to party. They're going to come out there and they're going to come. There's blind curves, and it happens right in our front door. I think most of y'all have a pass out or a handout on our location and where we're at and how the one blind canal reads into the other. Most of these statutes just says you're supposed to slow down. The FWC says we're not going to enforce it because Brevard County's Board of County Commissioners won't enforce it. Well, ball's in your court. Y'all figure it out, but I don't really want to have to deal with this on my watch. And I think that it's something that's been long and far kicked down the road. I don't really know how to make it go away without y'all's help. Me and Matt has worked on this Matt's brought me buoys. We've put stuff out there. St. John calls, says take the buoys out of the water. You can't have them there. We don't have the commission's support. It's childish. It's ridiculous, and it's dangerous. You know, so we spend a lot of money protecting a lot of other areas in Brevard County. I really think, being a local resident, born and raised here, family's been here for 100 years. I think it's just a little bit of money we should spend right there. We're not asking for a lot of money. I've looked at what we've asked to requisition. I hope that's not the price of a life, because if it is, I think we shortfalled everybody on that deal. But, you know, whatever you guys could do would be greatly appreciative. I don't mean to pound on you guys and say that it's your fault. I just think this has come up on your watch, and I think you just really need to put an end to it and stop it, because it's going to do nothing but just get worse from here on out, ma'am.
That's why when you came to my office, I was like, whatever we can do to help. I mean, I don't know that you'll have any opposition from what you're saying.
And I don't think, I mean, we all got the public's best interest in mind. I mean, I see 25, 50,000 people a year, and they're all there, and they're on vacation. They're having the best time of their life. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know what to do. I just know that it's just getting, the waterways are getting so clogged here in Melbourne. I mean, we all know that if you've been here a long time, or even a little while, on your jet ski or whatever it may be, you've seen a lot more people lately than you've ever seen. You know, so it's just more dangerous out there. It really is. And we just need your support. We need your help, whatever you can do.
Thank you.
I mean, it'd be greatly appreciated.
Commissioner Lober?
Seeing as how you've already indicated support, this is an item that's in your district. I'm happy you're in support of it. I'm happy that Matt Culver apparently is in support as well. And Ms. Barker had mentioned the need to me of cleaning up Chapter 122 of our code. So it sounds like a good idea, and consequently, I'd move to approve it.
All right, I have a motion by Commissioner Lober, second by Commissioner Smith. Did you have a comment?
Yes, Madam Chair, I do. I'm very familiar with the waters that he's talking about. I've spent a lot of time on those waters. That one canal is a terribly blind canal. When you come to the end of it, you're in the St. Johns River. And if you're not slowing down and somebody else is coming the other way, one of you is going to be toast. So it's long overdue, you're right. And it's interesting, as I travel around and do my jet skiing, the state of South Carolina has a requirement that slow speed under all bridges all the time. You have to slow down to 10 miles an hour or less. New Jersey is also the same way. So we don't have that here. So in this particular case, it's absolutely necessary because, as you said, you've got, if you're heading south on the St. Johns and you're not familiar with those waters, that person, that boater, doesn't know that there's an airboat camp on the other side with airboaters coming and going. So it's extremely important that we do this.
And like I said, I wish you would have came to me sooner. We could have solved this problem a lot sooner, because I'm happy to support it.
I've been trying to do it since 2009.
Yeah, I wasn't here, but I'm glad you came. I'm glad you reached out and had faith that your commissioner would listen, and I'm glad we can help. I'm just sorry it took this long.
Thank Matt, he's been pounding it for years.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Good luck. Item J2. Commissioner Tobias?
Thank you, Madam Chair. On March 7th, I raised to the board the possibility of revisiting its decision regarding the density recommendations contained in the North Merritt Island Small Area Study. This study, given to us last November, represent years of work by members of the NMI community. This kind of effort is not born out of idle curiosity. These people have watched as their homes are flooded and their streets turned into lakes after hard rain. We've seen the pictures, and they can visibly see the situation getting worse. By all accounts, the most critical of the recommendations was the recommendation to reduce the density of residential properties from 1:1 to 1 to 2.5. Instead of adopting these recommendations, members of the community were given coins. When I brought this up in March, Commissioner Lober requested a few months to discuss the issue with Mr. Denninghoff. While I understand this issue is complex, if we are going to act, the time is now. More developments are being planned every day in the area. Each one of these developments risks exacerbating the flooding and increasing runoff to the lagoon. So, Madam Chair, I'd like to hear from the public, but I certainly would have a motion as we move forward, Madam Chair.
Okay, are you making that motion now? That was sort of, you said you'd like to have a motion.
I'd like to make a motion, but I'd like to hear from the public first.
Okay, so I have a motion by Commissioner Tobias, and I guess we'll hold and see if there's a second after the public. Terry White, and after Terry, Kim Rosanka.
Thanks for allowing me to speak. My name is Terry White. I live at 5595 Joseph Court. If you're not aware of Joseph Court, it is now considered in a bowl. Matter of fact, it is considered the bottom of the bowl for North Merritt Island, but it wasn't always that way, because the property I have had one of the oldest orange groves on Merritt Island, and the earlier settlers did not plant the orange groves in the bottom of a bowl because oranges can't stand the water. So as a result, I no longer have 100 navel trees. I have 0. So, at any rate, I attended previous meetings and was told that for years now, that no further housing projects on North Merritt Island till something was done to handle the flooding issue and till schools were built on North Merritt Island. Neither one of these have happened. I've met with county officials, showed them around the area, answered questions for them because I've lived on North Merritt Island for 50 years. I have hunted and fished and walked almost every square yard of North Merritt Island from the Barge Canal, including on KSC, because I was one of the licensed hog trappers on Kennedy Space Center, so I've been all over the south end of the Space Center as well. But I go along with that we have to cut down on the amount of houses up there. The density of 2.5 acres sounds achievable. And this area hasn't always flooded. I mean, in a hurricane, we expect it. But like I say, for 50 years, I've been up there, and years ago, hurricanes did not flood the areas that I'm talking about now. It's all because of adjacent development. They say they're going to retain their water, but they only have to retain a certain amount of storm water for a little while, and then it floods onto all of their neighbors. A lot of the canals up that way have been blocked. I don't know if you're aware, but it used to flow east through Kennedy Space Center to the Banana River. It no longer flows that way. Now, unless they put up emergency pumps, all of the water on North Merritt Island from the barge canal has to flow out Pine Island. And also, if you're not aware, there are pumps on the Space Center that pump south to Pine Island. I was told multiple times Kennedy Space Center pumps do not flow south, so since I'm still badged to go out there, I went out and they still pump south. Mr. Demmingham can confirm that they do pump our way. They need to pump their water west to the river instead of sending it all down Pine Island. And I want to thank you for allowing me to come up and speak to you tonight. And if you have any questions, I'm always available. He knows exactly where my driveway is.
Mr. Denninghoff, that is?
Huh?
Mr. Denninghoff knows?
Oh, yes, sir. Yeah, we rode around together. So previous county commissioners actually came out and we rode around and looked at issues. Like I say, I've been dealing with this for years. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Kim Rosanka, and after Kim, Phil Bernardo.
New podium?
It's everything's new.
There's no room up here anymore.
You should see the electronics up here.
It's certainly a welcome improvement having these screens up here.
Yeah.
Sure.
Sort of feels like a P&Z meeting, doesn't it? With all the papers.
And I'm not the applicant.
What's that?
I'm not the applicant.
No, I know.
When she's ready, let's get her going.
Okay.
Okay. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the County Commission. My name is Kim Rosanka. I'm with the law firm of Cantwell and Goldman in Cocoa Village, Florida. I'm here representing Crisafulli Enterprises, the RCB Family Trust, Estelle Crisafulli, Joseph Crisafulli, Mary Crisafulli, Wayne Crisafulli, Chuck Crisafulli, and 782 LLC. All of these people and entity are opposed to the future land use change and to the approval of the recommendation number 3 in the small area study. These individuals and entities have been involved in farming and cattle in this North Merritt Island for over 100 years. Most farming is gone now, and property is limited to cattle, palms, and plant stock for nurseries. The small area study recommendation 3, reduction in density, is without factual support and will result in severe diminution to this property of my clients and to those of the over 2,400 acres in the small area study recommendation. The county will ultimately be looking at large damage awards for inordinately burdening the properties of these owners that will be hit with these flue changes. The first handout I gave you is from Bruce Moya. He's a member of your LPA and P&Z board. I know you all received it, but I know with the avalanche of emails, you might not have seen it, so I provided it to you again. The second handout is a smaller version of what you saw back in November 1st of 2018, when this was heard before. The very first page is the last page of the small area study. Now, all that yellow area is the 2,400 acres that's going to be impacted by this small area study recommendation. The second page is the actual recommendation number 3, and it states that 2,486.14 acres will be impacted. This is more than 25% of the acres in the study area and more than a third of the acres of residential uses. The next are the minutes from the meeting, which I've highlighted. All of the commissioners at that time, except Mr. Tabaya, stated they wanted more information. They wanted to wait till the North Merritt Island drainage study came out, which has not yet come out. Commissioner Barfield said he wants to make sure it's being done right and that science must dictate which needs to be done. You do not have that science yet. That's the North Merritt Island drainage study. The other documents are the addendum to the first agenda from November 2018, where it states the concerns of the P&Z, and as you recall, the P&Z LPA did not make a recommendation on this because of staff direction. The last 2 pages include my letter to you, the board, requesting that my client's 271.6 acres be removed from the small area study and any future land use changes. This is bigger than my client's acreage, however, in this request. This is about property rights and about 2,400 acres that can be impacted and the reduction of density without any facts to support it. These are lands that were held by my clients and others. They worked the lands and they had the expectation that this would be their retirement. It's not fair to those property owners. You're looking at Burt Harris Property Rights Acts, a takings claim, because there's no legitimate state interest. I'd ask that you not accept recommendation number 3.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question for you, if I may. Is that all right?
Sure.
Okay, so in terms of Burt Harris, and I'm going to get into it in my questions after all the public comment, but I do have a specific question for you, because I'm an attorney, but I don't practice government law apart from what I have to in wearing commissioner hat. That said, with respect to that, are you aware of whether any other municipalities, counties, local governments of any variety have been held liable and had to pay out damages or have been ordered to pay damages for either similar restrictions or more minor restrictions?
There's actually a case, and I don't remember the name right now, that deals with a very similar issue where the county came in and changed the future land use, and the court held that there could be damages. I don't know what the damages award were,
That's
but
fair.
it was remanded back after being reversed. So
Did it go up to the 5th or whichever DCA it was?
I think it was the 1st or the 3rd, but
Okay.
yes. And I do have that case, and I can get it to you, Commissioner.
I appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Do you have a question?
Yes,
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Sorry.
Mr. Brzenk, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. You didn't have your light on, or I wouldn't
Sorry,
have-
I was a
That's
little
okay.
slow.
No.
I was just reading this.
Just didn't want you to think I was ignoring you.
I'm looking at the email from Mr. Moya, professional engineer here, and I looked at the highlighted section. I'm looking at the sentence below the highlighted section. Am I reading this correct? Is it, if the issue is flooding, then increase the number of stormwater is required to be stored on the site. Do you agree with that statement?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Phil Bernardo, and after Phil, Mercedes Carlson.
Okay.
Hi. Name and address
Hi.
or name and city?
Phil Bernardo, Merritt Island. I'm Vice President of the North Merritt Island HOA, and I'm also a longtime resident, 31-year resident of North Merritt Island. When I first heard about Mr. Tobias' proposal, I thought that was great. That's great. Mr. Lober, our District 2 Commissioner, came to our HOA meeting last night, and he went to great effort to explain to us concerns about this Burt Harris Act. I'm not an attorney. I'll be honest, and I think he really tried really hard. I still don't fully understand that. So I don't feel like I'm really in a position to talk about that sort of stuff. What I think I can talk about is that absolutely, there's a very serious concern with drainage and flooding on North Merritt Island. I can say absolutely it is getting progressively worse with continuing to approve. It's almost like a runaway train. All this subdivisions and cruise ship parking and all these things that just keep coming and coming. And even without any kind of formal study, I see it happen every day, week, every year neighborhoods that flooded in the past, that have never flooded, are now flooded. There's standing water where there didn't used to be standing water. North Merritt Island has some of the lowest land in Merritt Island, probably some of the lowest land in the county. East of Courtney Parkway is probably the worst. Some of that is, it's a coquina table. It's not very permeable. There's maybe a few inches of soil, so it doesn't really run off that well. So I can say absolutely that that's a concern. We haven't even had a hurricane or a tropical storm yet, and I probably should hurry up and just kind of get through everything I want to talk about. But I looked at a new subdivision yesterday, and I looked at the surrounding area. The new subdivision's high and dry. The surrounding area, there's standing water where there didn't used to be standing water. People have mud hogs in their yard pumping the water away. So it is a problem. I also know it's bad for the environment. I can remember when the Indian River was crystal clear, a lot of fish. Now it's a brown mess. There's back-to-back fish kills. So that's a problem. As an engineer, though, I also understand how good technical data could significantly improve our chances of getting this thing passed. So as urgent as the problem is, I would agree with Mr. Lobert in delaying the decision based on 3 contingencies. First of all, make completion of this proposed drainage study a priority. Fund the drainage study, get the results within the next year, and at the same time place a moratorium on all new growth until the results of the study are available. And then number 3, allocate adequate funding to address all of the existing drainage and flooding problems that we're having right now. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And after Mercedes, Darlene Hunt.
Mercedes Carlson, Chase Hammock Road on North Merritt Island.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm here as a voice for myself, my family, and my neighbors in North Merritt Island. We're asking that you please advocate for us. You are our only hope. I was here last year begging you to please not rezone this development on our street to 40 houses as opposed to 20. But you gave them the approval. So that's the neighborhood that he was talking about that's high and dry, while everybody else around has standing water. So I'm asking that you please also put a moratorium on the development in North Merritt Island. We are asking, what happened to the North Merritt Island Stormwater Management Plan 20 years ago when we moved to North Merritt Island that was supposed to fix our problem? It hasn't. What happened to the comprehensive planning of 2.5 acres per residence to keep the density down on North Merritt Island? There are no new schools in 20 years since we've been there, and our schools were crowded when we got there. My son had portables at Lewis Carroll in 2nd grade. He's now 26 years old, and there are no new schools. We thought we were getting a new school. We got a Dollar General instead. Okay? There is no new infrastructure for the roads to handle the Space Center traffic coming from work and the new neighborhood. We have a two-lane dead-end street on Chase Hammock Road with ditches on both sides. And now you have approved a 40 homes development right across the street from us. You bring in the beautiful owl. Well, we have owls in North Merritt Island. And ironically, the new neighborhoods are called Egret's Cove and Heron's Landing. Well, that's where they used to be. But they're not anymore. They've dozed down, bulldozed all the trees, put in houses. No new schools, no better roads. There's one way to get on and off of North Merritt Island. It's a bridge. If the bridge isn't working, we're all stuck on there. We have a pump in our driveway to pump out the water just from the rain. We haven't even had a massive hurricane in a while. You talk about protecting the Indian River Lagoon, and yet you keep letting these new developments. We have the other 200 homes on Hall Road. So please, we are begging you. And is there a thing? Can a resident sue the county for letting the developers come and ruin our infrastructure and flooding our homes? Is that a thing? Can I sue the county for you guys letting the developers come and flood our properties? We were there first. We've been paying taxes.
I don't know that it would be appropriate for any of us to give you legal advice that could potentially jeopardize the county. I mean, I
saying.
I can tell you there is one attorney here, and there are other attorneys that certainly practice that area. So,
well, thank you very much. We're asking for your advocacy in this matter. This is where we live. We've been there 20 years. We're not seeing any improvement in the flooding. What happened to fixing the flooding? What happened to the comprehensive plan of 2.5 acres? It just went out the window, right? Please help us.
Commissioner Tobias, is that light for now or later?
Later, Madam Chair.
Okay. Darlene? And then Sarah Hodge.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners and staff. My name's Darlene Hunt. I live 125 West Christopher Road on North Merritt Island and have lived there for 42 years. I'd like to thank Commissioner Tobias for initiating a proposal for tonight's agenda regarding the density limitations for North Merritt Island and for informing residents about this issue last week. And I'd also like to thank Commissioner Lober for attending our Homeowners Association meeting last night and assisting by expressing your issues and concerns and recommendations with regard to this proposal. And also, Mr. Denninghoff, thank you very much for coming and speaking and helping us to understand the study that's going on. And the study has been going on for 4 years, working toward our recommendations for this small area. Now we have another 2 years where we're waiting for the results of the stormwater drainage model. And we believe that a request for a moratorium on the future density increases until this final data is calculated is warranted. This information will directly affect the stormwater impacts to the Indian River Lagoon, to our residents on 10,665 acres, which make up North Merritt Island, where we're bordered on 3 sides by water. So what I'd like to request is a moratorium on all future zonings that would increase the density on North Merritt Island until the final results of the stormwater study have been completed and are ready for implementation, predicted to take place in the fall of 2020. Not asking to stop anything that's going on, it's already happening, but to stop any future zonings, not even saying future development, future zonings. If we can just hold that until the study, and then we can go forward. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. After Ms. Hodge, we have Claudette Bish.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Sarah Hodge, and I live on North Merritt Island. I had 2 pages of comments, but a lot of it's been addressed, and so I support all the speakers so far that have given the information. I also want to thank Commissioner Tavia, Commissioner Lober, Mr. Denninghoff for all your information and for your caring and concern. I'm not a speaker, so I'll probably just...
You're doing fine.
But we're spending large sums of money to restore the rivers, and why are we increasing the density to the riverine floodplains and the wetlands? The runoff goes into canals and directly into the rivers. The cost of the constant pumping to keep our property from flooding must be huge, and it's borne by the taxpayers. The compensatory storage has not worked. It's not working now. And what are the new methods that you're going to do to maintain the runoff from flooding the neighbor's property? I don't know, but I hope you have something really bigger than has in the past, because it does not work. So many of our friends in North Merritt Island have had their homes flooded. How many more have to flood before something is done to stop this? We were flooded during the last hurricane. Our road and over 100 citrus trees were underwater for over 2 months. This area never flooded before, and my family's been on this property since the late 1800s. It's been handed down. They were original homesteaders of North Merritt Island. We ask that you consider the damages that are caused by higher density in the floodplains and wetland areas. They were made by God to protect and filter our rivers and to protect our homes from flooding. We ask that you support the items from District 2 Commissioner that has identified the needed that are needed to address the flooding concerns in North Merritt Island. Funding is needed to do this. We need your help in allocating funding to allow for expenditures to make improvements immediately and to better respond during the flooding and the hurricanes are coming. I want to thank you for your consideration, and I support everything that's been said so far from our North Merritt Island.
You timed that
Thank
perfectly.
Claudette Bish. And after Claudette, Jack Ratterman.
Hello, I'm Claudette Bish. I live at 240 North Grove Drive, Merritt Island. I'm new to the community. I moved in a year ago in May. Within 3 weeks, I had over a foot of water in my backyard. We went by the FEMA map. We were not required flood insurance and everything. We were not in a flood zone. It scared us. The water was creeping up to my house. Well, they said because we had 14 inches of rain or 17 inches of rain in a couple days. Well, guess what? This year we haven't had that and the water's back. I have this much water in my backyard, and it's not right. I moved up here from Brevard County. Are you guys doing the same thing that Brevard County did by overpopulating it, by taking away all the land, and then they can't understand why they're flooding? Please, I agree with everything that's been said here tonight. Please look into this, and before you make the same mistake that Broward and Miami-Dade has, don't do it. Think about your land, think about the environment and that stuff before you overcrowd us. Right now, going down Courtney Boulevard or Parkway, it's a speed track. People coming in from work, zip, zip. I mean, there's only 2 roads up and down. Soon it's going to be bumper to bumper, just like it is in Broward County, Palm Beach County, Miami-Dade. Yes, the money's nice. You get a lot of taxes and that stuff. But is it really worth it to sacrifice the land? Thank you.
Thank you. After Jack, we have Mary Spar.
My name is Jack Ratterman. I live at 568 East Hall Road. I was watching PBS and they did a documentary on Dr. DeBakey. And one of the things he said in that documentary was that ignorance was when you didn't learn from experience. And we have learned from experience on North Merritt Island that when there's new developments, it floods. I've never heard a resident on Merritt Island say, oh boy, a new development's coming in and we won't have any flooding. It's the opposite. Where we used to have periods of wet and dry, now it's mostly wet. And because of that, it's adversely affected the wildlife there. I'm back up against the Cabord Reserve, and when they would have periods of wet and dry, we had huge flocks of white arborists come in. Now it's not there. The birds are not there, and that's because it's all wet. You know, when you had the dry, the water would swell up or shrink down, and then the fish or the minnows would be in the small ponds, and they had easy pickings. The water now at hurricane levels is up to my stem wall. It's up to my stem wall now, and it's not even a hurricane. We respectfully request, you can hear this again, a moratorium on all future zonings that would increase the density of the North Merritt Island until the final results of the stormwater study have been completed and are ready to be implemented, which is predicted to be in the fall of 2020. I often try to think about what can I say to influence you. You know, everybody comes up here, they have their take. So I'm going to call on Victor Hugo. And Victor Hugo said, "And a house and a home." It says, "A house is built of logs and stones, of tiles and posts and piers. A home is built of loving deeds that last 1,000 years." We care about our community, and you can tell by the number of times we've come before you at this board and the number of people. And the decision you would make today is going to last us for 1,000 years. We can't change it. And the last part I'd like to say is to thank Commissioner Lober, Commissioner Tobias, and John Denninghoff and his wonderful staff. They've given us several flooding tours, and they've put up with our complaints and our questions for years. They bring the pumps out when the hurricanes come, and they staff them and do a wonderful job. So thank you for what you have done.
After Mary, we have Nancy Minerva.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Mary Spar, and I live in Cocoa, but I did live in Merritt Island for 30 years. Fear of litigation from large landowners has influenced North Merritt Island zoning decisions for a long time. One result is zoning decisions that negatively impact the Indian River Lagoon. And another result is increased flooding in North Merritt Island. The Burt-Harris Act was discussed several times during the small area study. So in 2018, I requested and received from the Brevard County Attorney's Office a list of Burt-Harris claims dating back to 2001. This reality check identifies 7 claims, 5 of which were dismissed or denied, 1 of which was amicably resolved, and 1 was settled for $160,000. One of these 7 claims may resurface in the future, but is dormant now. So in short, Brevard County lost only $160,000 to plaintiffs during the past 17 years because of Burt-Harris. That's all. While this past history cannot be extrapolated to predict the future, it certainly informs an assessment of legal vulnerability. I want to express my thanks to Commissioner Tobias and Commissioner Lober and Mr. Denninghoff as well. And I do understand the need for caution and to make sure that the study is completed. I support North Merritt Island Homeowners Association request for a moratorium on new rezonings that increase density until the stormwater study using the model is complete. There are other things that can be done. Brevard County stormwater management criteria are over 25 years old, and they date back to 1993. In 2008, revised stormwater management criteria were drafted, but never came to the county commission for a vote. The 2008 revised criteria included special requirements for North Merritt Island. They're currently sitting on the desk of a staff member. Please ask staff to ready them for the commission's consideration, and in the process, add a requirement that post-development nutrient levels not be greater than pre-development levels. Recently, I found out that Titusville stormwater criteria are better than the county's, so it's time for Brevard County to update its stormwater criteria.
Thank you, Mary. Nancy Minerva? And after Nancy, Chris Minerva.
Good evening, Commissioners and everybody. Thank you very much for being here and all you do, and Commissioner Lober and Commissioner Tobias and Mr. Denninghoff and their staff for all you've done, and everybody else for all you're going to do. There's so many things.
Can you
that
give
were
your
already
name?
said.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I didn't want to
Nancy-
interrupt you in case
Yeah.
you were headed there.
Okay, Nancy Minerva, North Merritt Island,
Thank
Levitt
you.
Drive. Okay, thank you, sorry.
That's okay.
Basically, everybody has said so many things so eloquently. There's not a lot that I want to add, but I stand to be counted as a North Merritt Island resident who believes that we should have a moratorium on future zonings until the stormwater reports are completed and we have that scientific data. And also, I was on the stormwater tour that Mr. Denninghoff and Mr. Wham and Mr. McClure and Robin Spratt all hosted for us, and it was really very helpful, and there's pictures on our website, the North Merritt Island homeowners, of what we did, and it was very enlightening to understand. And what I took away from it is how much is being done, but how many more resources are needed in order to do what Mr. Denninghoff has, tries to do to limit the water. So please support him as much as possible in getting the resources he needs to increase the pumps, to increase the staffing, and handle. I know that he always said he can't get rid of the flooding, but he is doing his best to keep the water out of people's homes. And as you've heard many people say, it's a lot of water that it's not even hurricane season. So thank you very much. Okay, and also one more thing is individuals, people who are already there. I know it's already been said, but the people who are already living here, don't they count? Please consider them. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello again.
Hello, thank you again. Chris Minerva, North Merritt Island. Okay, simply put, everyone has said all that I'm going to say, but for the quality of life of the long-time and short-time residents of North Merritt Island, and short of accepting the small area studies recommendation of 1 home per 2.5 acres, please to implement a moratorium on new development on North Merritt Island until the North Merritt Island drainage study is complete. And I also request that you could allocate funding for expenditures to make immediate improvements, to better enable the staff to respond to the storms and the water and the flood events. I believe whatever John Dunninghoff and his staff needs would be appropriate, and I appreciate that. And one more thing. If not for the residents of North Merritt Island, how about for the residents and the Indian River Lagoon, which is directly affected by, adversely affected by the additional development? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Pete What's that? Scabaron? Scabarosi?
Hi, my name's Pete Scabarosi, 5775 Joseph Court, dead center of the bowl. Okay? I have been here countless times speaking on this, and we have gotten nowhere except for worse. All right? I tell the story after the last hurricane on Hall Road, where you guys allowed that subdivision Egrets Landing to be built. After the storm, I left my house. My yard was green. My pond was a little overflowing. The ditches were full on Christopher Road. I got down the Hall Road, and that toilet flush of water off that subdivision was racing down Hall Road, hitting inadequate culverts, shooting up across the driveways till it got to that assisted living facility. And if anybody had a car there, it had been swept off the road. I went to my mother-in-law's place, surveyed the damage, went home. When I got home, Christopher Road was 2 inches of water across it. And the water wasn't going out. It was coming in. By the end of the day, my property had 16 inches of water on it because I live in the bowl and everything's coming at us. Now, over the years, the county has done nothing to the drainage ditches out there. On Christopher Road, 50% of the culverts are adequate. 20% of the culverts are close to being adequate. 15% are undersized, and 5% don't even work. You guys have loaned or rented steel plates to go over people's driveways that the culverts have fallen in, and they've been like that for 3 years. So we get no flow through the ditches. Now we've got a subdivision on the other side of the dam, and there's no place for it to go. I left my house today and we're at 90% flood stage. The road is only probably 12 inches from Creston, Christopher Road. All we need is a few more thunderstorms, we're underwater. Secondly, we have the public safety issue. Every road going east off of State Road 3 is a dead end. All right? So once it floods, you can't get safety people in to assist people. A tree crosses the road. Somebody calls an ambulance, you ain't getting them. If a fire starts to the west and comes east, we can't evacuate. All these grove owners knew this problem, and they could have put roads in to tie the roads together. I've been asking for that for 20 years. You need to solve the drainage problem before anything goes. You need to fix the culverts, fix the canals. The canals were put in
Okay,
North
I have to
Merritt
cut you
Island.
off. I'm sorry.
Okay, but they're put in by the Grove owners. They invented the problem. Have them fix it.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Lober?
And I just asked for a little bit of leeway to ask staff questions. It's going to take a few minutes, but I think it's absolutely imperative that I do.
Okay. Does anybody need a break before we bring it back to discuss? Okay, so.
All right, I'll get rolling if that works.
That's fine.
Okay, so the first set of questions will be for Mr. Denninghoff, and I've got some for Ms. Bentley, and then some more probably for Mr. Denninghoff. Mr. Denninghoff, prior to becoming Assistant County Manager, you were Director of Public Works, were you not?
Yes.
How many years have you been with the county?
About 23 years.
And how many years have you been a professional engineer?
About 32 years.
How many years have you lived continuously within the county?
About 55 years.
Out of those 55 or so years, I apologize for dating you, have you been a resident of Merritt Island? So for what portion of that time that you've been here?
On 2 different occasions, combined with 32 years.
So the same amount of time you've been a PE?
Yes.
And you still live in Merritt Island now, do you not?
I do.
Would it be fair to say that since my having taken office this past November, one of the topics which I've discussed with you perhaps most frequently has been the flooding in North Merritt Island?
Yes.
And right now, in actual practice, developers in North Merritt Island plan and account for only the water that actually falls on the property which they own. Is that right?
That's pretty much correct.
And right now, and I'm talking about in actual practice, developers in North Merritt Island do not typically account for water which has historically flowed onto their property from adjacent lands. Is that right, too?
That's pretty much correct, yes.
And when we hear that new development is flooding adjacent lands in North Merritt Island, many times that's oftentimes the result of new development reducing or eliminating their land's ability to accommodate water flowing from adjacent properties or neighboring properties. Is that fair to say as well?
Yes.
And would you agree that actually enforcing a compensatory storage requirement, which would mandate that any development in North Merritt Island account for these historical flows, is likely to be a benefit to the area?
Yes.
Would you, just briefly, if you would, explain the difference between riverine and estuary and floodplains?
I will try.
As briefly as possible. It may not be super brief.
It's estuarine floodplains are floodplains which drain pretty quickly and easily down to the level of whatever their receiving water body is, which typically surrounds that estuary. In this case, on North Merritt Island, we're talking about the Indian River Lagoon. Those floodwaters would flow through relatively unrestricted and typically short drainage paths to that receiving water body, and typically do not take a long time to reach it. And thus the floodwaters would drain very rapidly. Riverine floodplains, in contrast, are not so well connected, and the receiving water bodies typically, in order to drain to those receiving water bodies, the floodwaters have to flow typically a much longer distance through a restricted condition, and typically that restricted condition would be a river or a stream or a drainage ditch. The length and restriction results in the floodwaters taking a much longer time to drain and having to rise to a much higher level, and taking a lot longer to reach the water level that would be below a flood stage or similar to the receiving water body.
Thanks. That's a heck of a lot better than I could do. Unfortunately, or I guess the unfortunate reality is that the floodplain in North Merritt Island has, at least in recent years, been treated as estuarine under the county code. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Would it be fair to say that for months we've had a number of discussions on appropriately considering North Merritt Island to be riverine under the county code?
Yes.
Put simply, were the floodplain treated as riverine, to your understanding, could the county then mandate a 100-year floodplain compensatory storage for new development?
Yes.
And if North Merritt Island were treated as Riverine, would we be in a better position to guard against flooding damage due to new development and redevelopment?
Yes.
In order to be on sound footing to reclassify the floodplain, is it your understanding that we must await the results of the roughly $450,000 drainage study which is presently taking place in the area?
I believe that's correct, yes.
Is this because the study is likely to provide the county with a legitimate technical and scientific basis to support that reclassification?
Yes, that's what we expect will come from the study. Of course, we don't currently have the results of the study, so it remains to see what we'll get.
Have I at any point in time ever interfered with the drainage study or any progress with that that's presently taking place in North Merritt Island?
No.
Is it accurate to say that I've been entirely supportive of the drainage study and that I've made it crystal clear to you, perhaps from day one, that if the results of the study support the imposition of compensatory storage requirements, that my plan is to promptly move to implement such requirements?
Yes, of course, that assumes the study results support that conclusion, yes.
Now, I want to talk about the basis for restricted development here. Do you recall or having had one or more conversations with the county attorney about flooding in North Merritt Island?
Yes.
Would it be accurate to say that when you, Fritz from my office, Ms. Bentley, and I most recently discussed the legality of a possible building moratorium pending the results of the drainage study, it was agreed by all present that a moratorium would be premature because the evidence which could potentially support it is anecdotal, at present at least, and that we need more substantive evidence and documentation in order to take any such drastic action?
Yes, a wholesale building moratorium on all new construction, I felt, and I think we all felt, was premature, and in my opinion, we needed better evidence to support it.
All right, I want to ask a slightly different question here. I'm not talking for the next question about all building, but would a moratorium only on rezoning impact not only the large landowners who've been identified, but also many owners of vacant single-family lots?
Yes.
And having lived on Merritt Island for the bulk of your life, and I'm not going to say how long that is, as a credentialed professional engineer and as a longtime county employee with vast personal firsthand experience and knowledge regarding North Merritt Island flooding, are you able to tell me that restricting development by requiring 2.5 acres per home will improve drainage better than implementing compensatory storage requirements?
No, I can't. I don't have enough data and engineering analysis to come to that conclusion.
I want to talk about some things that we know and some things that we don't know. Based upon your conversations with the county attorney, those that we had together and those that you may have had separately, is it your understanding that any claims that are actually litigated against the county for diminished property values as a result of limiting potential development will be litigated with the aid of expert testimony?
Yes.
And were you called to testify in such a case as an eminently qualified professional engineer based on your training, knowledge, and experience, could you ethically state that amending the future land use map from 1 house per acre to 1 house per 2.5 acres is a less restrictive and less damaging measure to the landowner than requiring compensatory storage?
No, I don't have sufficient engineering data and analysis to support that yet.
Could you ethically testify that amending the flue from, to 1 per 2.5 would resolve the flooding problems in North Merritt Island?
It won't resolve the flooding problems.
It's pretty definitive. While restricting development might reduce increased flood potential, could you ethically testify that amending the flue to 1 per 2.5 would in and of itself stop flooding from becoming more severe? And I think I know your answer based on the last response.
No, it wouldn't.
Now, would a topographical survey of the floodplain be immensely beneficial to have in order to better evaluate the benefits and detriments of changing the flue?
Yes, a topographical survey would be very beneficial.
Well, not a topographical survey in itself. The drainage study that's taking place right now provides land elevations for roads, drainways, the driveways, pipes, and inlets which control the flow of water. Does it not?
It does.
And the ongoing drainage study relies on LIDAR for land elevations, coupled with enough on-the-ground measurements to increase the accuracy of LIDAR to a high degree of accuracy, does it not?
It does.
Could you ethically testify that more increased density in and of itself results in increased flooding?
No, not necessarily.
Is this perhaps because, among other reasons, compensatory storage could wholly offset extremely dense development, whereas sparse development without adequate planning could result in increased flooding of adjacent neighboring properties?
Yes.
While restricting development might reduce the increased flood potential, could you ethically testify that what's being proposed will cure the flooding problem?
Could you repeat that, please?
Sure. Well, I'll acknowledge that restricting development may well reduce the increased flood potential. Could you ethically testify that what's being proposed that's actually on the agenda right now will cure the flooding problem?
No, it won't fix the existing recurring flooding.
And most importantly, is this is a question which is geared much more so to experts than attorneys. Looking only at flooding, could you ethically testify that we have an adequate scientific or technical basis to support amending the FLU to 1 per 2.5?
I don't think we do, no.
And then I have some questions for Ms. Bentley, if I may.
As many, or?
Not as many. I'll keep it as quick as I can, and I think we're through the hump here.
I mean, there was some really great questions in there, I have to say.
I promise there's some gems here, too.
Is
if
it
you'll
as-
bear with me.
Okay.
This is not as long.
I'm just
And
wondering if we need a break or if we...
Glad he's not charging us by the hour.
No, it's not by the 10th of the hour, I promise. This is pro bono. So Florida Statute 70.001 is known as the Bert J. Harris Jr. Private Property Rights Protection Act. Well, I'm not sure if you're familiar with anyone named Bert Harris. Are you at least familiar with the Bert Harris Act?
Yes.
All right. Now, would you briefly, if you would, explain Bert Harris insofar as it may apply to the agenda item that's at hand?
Bert Harris is a statute which allows private property owners to make claims against the government when a new regulation comes in and inordinately burdens their property and causes a diminution in value. It is possible that density reductions could result in claims like that. It's not a guaranteed result. It's a parcel by parcel and very fact-specific analysis. But it is a consideration.
Is it fair to say that Bert Harris covers not just undeveloped land, but also land that could be subject to redevelopment?
Yes.
Is it fair to say that courts have been apt to hold local governments financially liable for minor restrictions?
We've seen them hold the government liable for wetlands restrictions, setbacks, and other regulations, yes.
Would it be accurate to say that to determine a diminution of value claim, and God, that's a tough word, one must have appraisals both before and after the change to alleged to have diminished the value?
Yes.
It's truly impossible to say to what extent the county could be on the hook were we to amend the FLU to 1 per 2.5, absent adequate scientific or technical basis to support such a change, isn't it?
It's unknown.
And while I know you don't want to paint a bullseye on the county and advertise a legal vulnerability, I still have to ask the question in the hopes of avoiding just such a liability. It's entirely possible that the county could be on the hook for tens of millions of dollars were we to implement the proposed changes, is it not?
We don't know.
Do you have any idea about how many potential plaintiffs we might be looking at?
No.
Am I wrong in my strong belief that there's a high likelihood that the county will face numerous lawsuits as a result of implementing the proposed changes to the FLU?
We don't know. That depends on the parcels and the owners.
Do you know whether you have enough manpower in your office to handle all of the potential claims?
If we received a large number of claims, we would have to go to outside counsel.
And it's entirely possible that the county could incur expenses in retaining outside counsel to deal with the sheer volume of those suits, is it not?
If insurance did not cover, yes.
And on that same topic, while the county's insurer may presently cover the cost of defense for such claims, do you know whether our insurer would either revisit coverage or perhaps examine exclusions and premiums in light of the increased exposure were we to find the county sued for this particular action?
No, I don't know the answer.
And while the county's insurer may presently cover certain judgments, do you know whether our insurer would revisit coverage again, including exclusions and premiums in light of the increased liability exposure?
We don't know what they would do.
Assuming the goal of amending the FLU is to address flooding concerns, were it proven that requiring compensatory storage in lieu of amending the FLU to 1 house per 2.5 acres would have accomplished the same ends without harming property values to the same degree, is it likely that the county would be on the hook for, at minimum, the difference between the diminution of value between those two options?
It's a possibility.
Has anyone ever articulated to you why amending the FLU to 1 house per 2.5 acres would or even could be more advantageous than requiring compensatory storage?
No, but I was not at all the meetings.
Do you believe that we have a sufficient scientific, or do you believe we have a sufficient documentation and evidence to put in place a building moratorium pending the outcome of the drainage study?
Not today, not based on what we have in the record right now.
Given that you don't believe that we have a sufficient scientific basis to implement such a moratorium, would it not expose us to all the more liability to permanently modify the FLU in a way which would likely harm property values in the area?
That is going to depend on the parcels and the particular physical attributes of the parcels.
And my last question for her before I wrap it up, as I said, I would keep it a little shorter. Regarding compensatory storage, were the floodplain treated as riverine as a result of the conclusions reached in the drainage study, could we not simply apply this data, coupled with more modern modeling to the existing law in order to enforce compensatory storage requirements for all new development?
Yes.
And then if I can wrap it up with a few questions, Mr. Denninghoff. Do you recall a proposal by WK&R Groves to develop a property on the north side of East Chrysophilie Road that came to the County Commission on December 6, 2018?
I do.
Do you recall having inquired, my having inquired as to whether the developer evaluated historic drainage patterns?
Yes, I do.
And did I do that?
Yes.
Do you recall having indicated in response to questions I asked you that the county is aware of historic flooding in the area?
Yes.
That the developer was not obliged to improve the draining system in the area?
Yes.
That the proposed rezoning could cause significant and adverse impacts on natural wetlands and water bodies?
Yes.
And that there was not enough information to determine the impact on drainage in the area?
Yes.
Do you recall whether that request to change zoning classification necessary to allow a housing development to move in was approved, and if so, what the vote was?
It was approved with a 4-to-1 vote in favor of the proposal.
And it had the, I'm going to skip a few items I was going to ask you in the interest of time, but that had the impact of allowing more development in North Merritt Island, did it not?
Yes, it increased density.
So getting back to the instant matter here, has the District 3 Commissioner discussed liability under Burt Harris with you to any appreciable degree of detail?
We've had some brief discussions on it outside of board meetings.
And given your credentials and technical expertise, did the District 3 Commissioner ever discuss with you whether decreasing density in the flue is the least impactful means of addressing flooding in North Merritt Island?
I don't recall that specific conversation, no.
Do you recall having had any conversations with the District 3 Commissioner in which you discussed whether amending the flue has adequate documentary or scientific evidentiary to support?
I don't recall having that conversation.
Did the D3 Commissioner ever discuss whether amending the flue would be more effective than implementing compensatory storage requirements?
I may have had a discussion along those lines. I do recall one conversation that for sure where the compensatory storage requirement would be a significant improvement to the drainage situation for future development.
And as I know you've spoken with the county attorney about potential liabilities, is it fair to say that based upon those conversations, your concern is heightened regarding potential liability the county would be assuming were the flue to be amended as proposed today without waiting for the results of the drainage study?
I would have a heightened concern, yes.
Is any portion of the area encompassed by the proposed change in flue located in D3?
No.
Is 100% of the area encompassed by the proposed change in flue in D5? Pardon me, in D2?
Yes, it is.
Is it your present estimate that the drainage study will be complete roughly fall of 2020?
Yes, that's correct.
Is there anything that the County Commission can realistically do to accelerate the progress of that study?
Not really realistically, I don't think so.
And at that point in time, when the drainage study is complete, assuming the results will support such an action, will you work with me to draft explicit and unambiguous compensatory storage requirements to be presented for a vote before the County Commission?
Assuming the study results support that action, yes.
Do you believe that it's likely that compensatory storage requirements are going to be less impactful than modifying the flue toward property values while more directly addressing the issue of worsening flooding as a result of development?
I think that would be a logical conclusion, yes.
So we recently discussed implementing a moratorium on development that does not utilize riverine compensatory storage until such time as the drainage study is finalized. Based upon your engineering experience and the information available to you and your conversations with the county attorney, do you believe that we can lawfully implement such a moratorium in North Merritt Island?
I'm sorry, I need you to repeat that.
Let me rephrase that. It's not really the best way to phrase it. Do you believe that we have an ability to implement a restriction prohibiting any new development that doesn't factor in compensatory storage in a way that would account for historic drain flow pending the results of that drainage study? Because that to me is something that I can get behind if I hear from you and I hear from Ms. Bentley that is something we can lawfully implement.
I think a moratorium along those lines would be a lower level of concern than the previous idea would be, yes.
Okay, and I'll bounce that by her at the end here, but just the last few questions, because I'd like to put in place measure based on, at least some measures based on what we've heard to address flooding right now. while at the same time doing what we can to respect property rights, at least in part to avoid a high likelihood of liability. Do you recall my having publicly expressed concern as recently as last night at the North Merritt Island HOA about the age and condition of pumps used to mitigate flooding in North Merritt Island?
Yes, I do.
And ironically, is it the case that one such pump, the mosquito control pump, suffered an outage that same night?
Yes, it failed last night.
And for the record, neither of us sabotaged it. So it just happened to be. Right now, would it be advisable and reasonable to replace the mosquito control pump with 2 similar-sized electric pumps?
Yes.
And right now, would it be advisable and reasonable to install an emergency generator backed up transfer station to power those pumps?
Yes.
And then right now, would it be advisable and reasonable to install, to alter the size and/or number of pipes located under Hall Road?
Yes.
And right now, would it be advisable and reasonable to design and install a drainage structure at Pine Island to be able to better control water levels and prevent essentially pumping water in a circle, as I think the folks that have done the drainage study could appreciate, or
Yes.
that have done the drainage tour?
Yes, I do, yes.
Now, in addition to any funds already set aside for capital improvement, roughly how much additional funding do you believe these measures would require?
We have funding for most of those things that you just mentioned in place. About $360,000 is allocated for 2 to 3 years from now for that alternative outfall from the Pine Island area. And that's as soon as we'd be able to put it in with the existing funding. There is another pipe that we'd like to install, but the cost associated with that one would be about $300,000, which is completely unfunded at this time.
So if we wanted to accelerate it, essentially we'd need 360 and another 300?
We'd either have to accelerate the 360 from 2 years from now and add 300, or just wait for that 360 and only add 300.
Okay, there's going to be a motion coming up, but last question for you. Would you please advise whether there are any additional resources the County Commission could provide you which would help address flooding in the immediate future?
Well, first I'd like to point out that we just recently, for this year, we added a second drainage ditch cleaning crew, which is a major improvement. For this coming year, we're adding a third ditch cleaning crew, which is another substantive improvement, but we can always do more ditch cleaning. The second thing is the 2 portable 24-inch pumps that we have were actually purchased the year before I came to work for Brevard County in 1996. So they're about 24 years old now, almost 25, and they're getting weak, and so coming up with a plan to perhaps replace one of those would be a good plan. I haven't got a price on that. I know it's north of $500,000. It may approach $750,000.
Each or for the pair?
Each. Wow. They were around $190,000 or $200,000 in 1995.
So we're looking, if with all in that we've discussed, at least around $2 million.
Yes.
All right, then if I may, Ms. Bentley, I guess I probably actually should have posed the question to you earlier about whether you believe we'd be on sound footing or better footing to implement a moratorium on new development that does not, basically that would require new development to account for historic drainage.
Well, we would need to update the legal research on moratorium. The path you're talking about is really going down the same path that we went with the septic tanks, allowing development, but requiring an upgraded treatment of water instead of sewage in this case. Your particular small area study isn't focused on compensatory storage. We would need to get technical information to address the compensatory storage. I think probably Road and Bridge, Stormwater, and an engineer would need to provide that technical background to support a moratorium of that type.
I appreciate it. So I'm going to go ahead and make a motion if that's all right, or if you want, we can go through the rest of the commentary.
I was going to say it's Commissioner Tobias' item, and he's next to speak. Go
Yes,
ahead.
ma'am.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And first, I'd like to stipulate that you are a qualified expert, Mr. Deddinghoff. And I only have one question for you on this one before I go ahead and throw a motion out here. In your expert opinion, would you say North Merritt Island is a riverine or an estuarine system?
My opinion is that it's a riverine system. It more approximates that than an estuarine system.
Thank you very much.
I would just say right now we've interpreted it as estuarine historically.
But in your opinion right now it is a riverine. That
Absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind.
Thank you for that definitive statement. I think we're all almost on the same page here from what I've been listening. While my thoughts had been to go ahead and accept the recommendation of the small area study, after listening to Commissioner Lober, clearly he has a strong handle on the legal liability that we had gotten into. Also listening to Kim Rosanka and Ms. Rosanka's professional engineer, Bruce Moya here. She highlighted a portion of an email she got from a professional engineer. What was interesting, if you go down one line, I asked about this. If the issue is flooding, I don't think we have, I think we have 30 people in the audience that can tell us it's a flooding issue. Then the increased amount of stormwater that is required needs to be stored on site. And then I went back and looked through the minutes of the March meeting, and Commissioner Lober had it right months ago. He talked about compensatory storage. I remember him saying that, and in all honesty, I really didn't understand what he was talking about. So I think the answer to this is extremely simple, and it keeps us out of the liability of Bert Harris, as well as adding in new issues that can potentially deal with making flooding worse until we get that study back. And so I'd like to make a motion, and it's direct staff to reclassify North Merritt Island as a riverine system and require the requisite compensatory storage for new developments until such a time that the updated modeling is finished and the board has a reasonable time to review the data that is associated with it. So that would be my motion, Madam Chair, and certainly I'd be open to discuss that.
Commissioner Pritchett?
Thank you, ma'am. I started getting a little confused. I started getting all the agenda items because there was a North Merritt Island small study, and then we broke it out into the North Merritt Island drainage study, which Commissioner Barfield also, as you, Commissioner Loper, was very passionate about the North Merritt Island area and as far as flooding. And I'm just throwing him out of kudos for confirming this plan to get this set up. A couple of thoughts that I went back, and thank you, Mr. Zanka, for bringing this back up. There is more flooding in our county than there has been before. I'm not trying to say it's not a real issue. North Brevard, we have a ton of flooding. We have Wendover, they're also in a bowl. So this is a situation. So here's my thought. I'm not sure what's causing it, except I do know the water tables are going up and the water levels are going up. They do some studies of the Indian River Lagoon, and there's areas of the outlanding part that's going to be completely underwater in 10 years. So we have a problem we're going to have to address as homeowners. It's something you're going to need to think of. And if your house is in a bowl, you have some good engineering work to start getting ready for, to try to make some decisions of how to keep your house dry. So just throwing that out to you, and that's what I've been telling my district too, working through some things, because they're flooding right now without hurricanes too. And the water table's already up, and you put more water on it, it's not going to drain out anywhere. It's going to sit. So just, you need to be prepared for that. Back going through the notes that we had here, and I'm glad I got to read it, because I was thinking at that time we're trying to figure out the density. I don't know if 1 to 2 is right. I don't know if 1 to 1 is right. So we decided to do this study with the drainage to try to figure out which would be appropriate. Because you can't make an emotional decision on this, you have to make an appropriate one. Because let me throw this out to you. you've got to be representing all of the landowners there. I mean, you know, not everybody there might be in the homeowner group, but there is a large group of people that own land, and everybody gets to have a fair say in this. And not that this might not be the correct path. It might be 1 to ½ an acre. I don't know. But we don't have the science yet. And I don't know that it's fair to put this stipulation on other property owners the same way I wouldn't put it on property owners now asking for things. I think you have to be fair in that. You have to have some kind of balance in that. So I don't know if it's fair taking away somebody else's property rights. And Commissioner Lober, I don't know if I owned a big hunk of property and we did this, I would sue us, you know, if I thought it wasn't correct.
I would too.
Yeah, so I want to be fair with that. Not that I don't care about the flooding, I care about it up north. And I think it's something we have to really work through. As far as someone saying Titusville's doing it, we pay a lot of money for stormwater right now on our water bills for this. So this might be something, again, and I'm throwing out an old one, we might have to start paying more money to start fixing some of these stormwater problems and figuring out how to get them off the properties and get them to where they can be treated and put in the right direction. But again, I think this is something that, Commissioner Lober, I know you're thinking about this, but I think we should wait a little longer. We've been working on this. I don't think there's anything that's going to change it at this time by doing anything different, because I think we run into a real risk when we allow the minority to have rule. I think it needs to be majority. And if you've heard from the majority of the property owners in that area and they're all on board, but I don't know that you have. And this was our biggest conversation. And again, we spent 9 hours on this for a couple of meetings, and you might bore yourself and go back and watch through them. But this was a big discussion, because I think we just need to make sure that, and again, sir, I'm going to, you know, this is your area, you got to live in it. But I just want to throw out that recommendation to you, maybe to hesitate on this, just take a little pause, and maybe spend a little time with, find out who owns all the property and have a good discussion before we, you know, even if they don't sue, I would just hate to take away someone's right if it's not appropriate. So.
Commissioner Lober?
No, you have some valid points, and I'm partway where Mr. Tabaya is on this, or Commissioner Tabaya is on this. There are two things I want to accomplish tonight so that folks didn't essentially come out here and waste their time by telling us how things are. I think the first thing is I do want to move to accelerate the $660,000 that's earmarked to be spent in the next 2 or 3 years anyway. I know that we have plenty of departments that have reserves that we can borrow from. It's not that we're looking to allocate more, but we're simply trying to accelerate by 2 to 3 years the $360,000 and $300,000 expenses that were identified toward the beginning of the set of questions about particular expenses by Mr. Denninghoff. And then also, I would hope, in addition to that, we can allocate some additional funds to address the pumps, which, quite frankly, I don't know that we're in a position to fund both of them at this point, but seeing as how they're decades old, I don't want to make the prediction I made yesterday evening about a pump failing because it's old only to have it happen the same night. I don't want to jinx it by doing that. But in terms of where I am with a moratorium, and I apologize for being circular at all, but if it's county legal's opinion that we can put in place even tonight a moratorium to a reasonable degree of safety where we're not, I don't care if we get sued, I care if we get sued and we're highly likely to lose. That's my concern. If we can implement a moratorium obligating new development to account for that historic drainage, I'm happy to do that tonight. I'm happy to either have Commissioner Tabaya amend the motion, or I'm happy to make a motion accomplishing that. But I just want to hear from county legal if that's something we can proceed with tonight, because if we can, I'd love to.
You can't adopt a moratorium without notice. So you can't adopt a moratorium that way. Right. What you're talking about is a different interpretation of the floodplain based on an engineering opinion and implementing the regulations based on that new interpretation.
What's the fastest possible way to accomplish that?
That is an interpretation that would be based on Mr. Denninghoff's opinion of the Riverine floodplain.
And if I could bounce it to Mr. Denninghoff?
Sure.
I'm not sure what your question to me is. Please state it again, please.
Right. Basically, I'm looking to put us in a position where, pending the outcome of the flood study, the drainage study, we can put in place a moratorium, not banning new development, but obligating any new development to account for not just the water that falls within the confines of their property, but also all of the water that's historically flowed onto that property from adjacent lands. I just don't know the process in order to put that in place. I know that it was done in the somewhat recent past with septic systems, but I wasn't on the commission at that time, so it's an alien topic to me.
Well, let me just share with you, when the current code was implemented, an interpretation was applied to North Merritt Island that it was estuarine. That is an interpretation which I disagreed with at the time. I still disagree with it. There are some characteristics of the floodplain on North Merritt Island that are similar to an estuary or estuarine floodplain, but predominantly it behaves like a riverine floodplain. And that's why I answered the questions earlier the way I did. In any event, the code, I don't believe, refers to Merritt Island or North Merritt Island as being estuarine or riverine. It just requires compensatory storage for the 100-year floodplain for riverine floodplain impacts. And so from my perspective, it is a riverine system, and so compensatory storage ought to, under the code, be applied. However, we have, I don't recall exactly when the code was implemented, but since then it's been interpreted as estuarine, and that's what staff has reviewed all applications and development plans since then from that interpretation. So from my perspective, it's riverine. I don't know exactly from a legal perspective where that leaves us, but that's my opinion about it.
Well, let me ask you, in that case, would you work with me and with Ms. Bentley as well to put within the next, let's say, 2 regular commission meetings? I don't want to say it's going to happen in 2 weeks because I think that may be unrealistic, but let's say within 2 regular commission meetings, so within roughly a month from now, to put forth whatever we need to put forth and hopefully get it advertised and noticed appropriately to put in place a moratorium of the type that was just discussed?
I'll be happy to do that as the board directs.
Okay, and I don't know if we want to see if your motion has a second, but that would be essentially what my motion is if it fails for lack of a second.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. I don't think we need to have I don't think we need to have a moratorium. I think we can do this tonight. And all my motion was doing was you qualified Mr. Denninghoff as an expert over and over and over again, which I greatly agree. But his interpretation as a professional engineer, he said 4 different times that this is a riverine. So all I'd like to do is use his professional opinion till we get back the study, and there would be no need to have a moratorium. There would be no. I'm not opposed to a moratorium, but we can do this tonight. My question would be to the county attorney: if we were to direct staff to reclassify NMI as a riverine system, and all that was required, would that A, require notice, and B, do you see any imminent Bert Harris issues because of that?
There's case law indicating that new information to an old regulation does not create a Bert Harris claim. So no, there shouldn't be a Bert Harris claim. Now, whether or not people will attempt to make claims because you're changing the interpretation, that could happen. But the definition of a riverine floodplain is something that, or versus estuarine, we may end up litigating that. But if we are on a solid scientific ground, we'll have expert witness testimony, and you'll have to go with what's riverine and what's estuarine according to the courts.
Thank you. Madam Chair? So Commissioner Lober, I don't even think, I'm not opposed, we could do that in whatever, 2 weeks or 4 weeks, that would be fine, but we immediately can use the interpretation of the professional engineer and reclassify it tonight, my understanding, as a riverine system instead of an estuary system, and I'd be willing to add on to amend my motion to have a moratorium added to that if you would.
I'm happy to address it, or I don't want to jump in front of anyone.
I can say you can go back and forth as much as you want because
Okay.
we've sort of gotten off the rails of where this started anyway.
Well, the short of it is, if Mr. Denninghoff thinks that we're in a position, because again, this is more of a question, although I certainly value attorneys many times, I think this is a question that's going to be an expert witness question down the road. If you feel comfortable that that's something that we can defend with what we have currently, I'm happy to go in that direction, as long as we address it again, just focusing only on compensatory storage and not addressing changing the density. I'm happy to do that, but I just need to hear from you that that's something you're comfortable with.
I'm very comfortable with my opinion on this. I can tell you that I don't know of any legal parameters that would come to bear or factor on this. I have not researched it in that sense, but I'm very comfortable with my opinion on this situation.
Okay.
Commissioner Pritchett?
Yeah, maybe in a couple weeks. I'm not really ready to be in a rush with that. I don't think there's going to be mass development over the next couple weeks, so I think we need to take a little time on that. Not that I don't respect you, Mr. Denninghoff, but I just think it's wise. Whenever I've made a very quick emotional decision, I've ended up in a mess. Asked my husband about a few things I bought I shouldn't have. So I think coming back with taking this pause, taking a couple weeks and come back with it, I'd be very comfortable of trying to figure this out. I've heard from a great number of residents, but I think I want to give everybody fair time, sir, to reach out to you also. Just because we have already spent 9 hours in the past on this, very detailed, and this kind of revisited some of the things that we spent a lot of time thinking through and trying to get a little bit of thought through with it. So I'm not going to support changing it tonight. And I think as you bring it back in a little bit and we have time to hear what the community's saying from all the landowners, it would be great, because you made the statement, Mr. Denninghoff, that the new building construction isn't necessarily causing the flooding right now. So I think we need to get the science back, and if it comes back saying this is what we got to do, I'm on board. But if it comes back saying we haven't and we've already taken away the rights of somebody, I think we've made a grave error that we don't need to make right now, because it's just a little bit away from what we have. And one more thing too, Commissioner Lober. We're gonna have to let the manager come back with ideas on funding, because that's a lot of money. And again, Commissioner Bisnardi has flooding too, we have flooding. And if we start throwing out, $2 million here or $100,000 here, I mean, everybody's gonna need it. And not Merritt Island doesn't need it, but we do that, I'm gonna have my district want it too. And I can't get any of you guys ever to up the fees. So we're going to have to figure out how to do this on a budget. So I think that's something we're going to have the county manager come back if he has any creative ideas of how to do those things also.
Because I
Sure.
I have the burden of running the meeting, so sometimes you don't hear any of my input to the
Yes,
end,
ma'am.
which normally is fine. I am fine, at least with looking at this, but, call me crazy, but I've been here a while and I've seen a lot. We've discussed a lot. Commissioner Barfield was very passionate about the flooding, as was I, in helping him out. But more information is power, in my opinion. And I think, we've not only taken the intent of Commissioner Tobias' item and changed it. I don't know what it means to reclassify. I don't know what that means to property owners out there. And I would rather be armed with the information before making a rash decision, because I do care about the flooding in Merritt Island. I think we've demonstrated that by supporting Commissioner Barfield and trying to find him more money and trying to address it. But I think, Merritt Island, unfortunately, you're a victim of your elevation and of your landscape. And we'll do whatever we can to help. However, not by pouncing on everybody else's property rights either. We want smart development. We don't want to hinder people or hurt them any more than I want anybody dumping property on or dumping water on your property as it is. I think, having had professional engineers here in the past, that the danger of making these lots too large is that they have no stormwater. So now you've created a development that essentially doesn't have any stormwater system at all, because it's so big. They have a little pond in the back and it does zero for the neighborhood. So again, I would feel more comfortable, more armed with information, because we're talking about something completely different than what we're supposed to be talking about. So I would like staff to come back. I appreciate your expertise, and I often call on you when we need something. But the thing that concerns me most is reclassifying this. If you have some of it that's estuary, some of it that is riverine, and if it's not going to resolve the flooding problem, is now the burden on the new developer to take drainage coming from old developments. I mean, how is that their burden? Should they accept that? I mean, I don't know, because if that guy goes and gets his property approved and he starts developing a year before I do, and I develop a PUD, now I'm having, because we approved or commission approved something, we're having to now compensate for his property. That seems like a liability to me. So I'm not comfortable with that either. So I think there's there's room for compromise. I think rather than a moratorium, maybe look at, modifying the compensatory storage rules. I mean, if you want to do something more quickly than waiting until the study comes out, I would be open to that, because then at least that's something. And that's not harmful. I mean, rather than doing a moratorium, because it's sort of backwards, I think. Just my 2 cents.
I understand where you're coming from, and, briefly, I'm happy to do things in a deliberate fashion and not do anything impulsively, but I also want to make sure that we have direction to staff so that this doesn't just float out in the abyss and then not get resolved until a year from now or 6 months from now. I still do think that a moratorium, not on all rezoning, not on all new development, but specifically to address the compensatory storage, is something that's likely appropriate, especially given what I've heard from Mr. Denninghoff and everything that I've heard in terms of input from folks. My motion, and we can see if his dies for lack of a second if you'd like to do that first, but I do have a motion with respect to directing staff to prepare some documents that would put us in a position to get that advertised, and then also to have Mr. Abate look where we could borrow the money, because we don't need to come up with new money. We simply need to borrow it because it's earmarked in 2 to 3 years anyway for the first $660,000 to get those projects accelerated. So it's not that we won't be able to pay it back or we don't know how that's going to happen because the money is slated to be there. I just want to move it and have it done faster. But I don't know if you want to see if his motion dies for lack of a second first, and then we can go in that direction.
Well, Commissioner Tobias is queued to talk. Do you want to say something else, comment?
You want me to deal with the motion, Madam Chair?
I'm saying you can do either. You're just queued to speak next. I
Great.
wasn't sure if you had more commentary or if you wanted to modify it.
No. I'll just go with the initial motion. That was to direct staff to reclassify NMI as a riverine system, which our expert staff has told us that it is a riverine system. Just to be clear, this does not deal with density at all. And let me make one other point here. You guys all listened, everyone. There was one party that spoke out against this, and the one party provided us with documentation that we all have here, and Ms. Rosanka said, with Bruce Moya, another professional engineer, if the issue is flooding, then increase the amount of stormwater that is required to be stored on the site. So everyone is in agreement with this. All professional engineers here, I imagine everyone out there that is concerned about flooding, everyone is on the same page here. Our experts are on the same page here. The other side's experts are on the same page here. This is low-hanging fruit. This is not a moratorium. This is not dealing with density. This is just taking a 24-year professional engineer's advice who is willing to defend it should it come to litigation, and saying there's no need for notice, there's no need. This is very simple. So I'll say it one more time. Direct staff to reclassify NMI as a riverine system and require the requisite compensatory storage for new developments until such a time the updated modeling is finished and the board has reasonable time to review the data associated with it. That's the motion, Madam Chair.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Tobias. Commissioner Pritchett? Oh.
I mean, my light's on, but I'm not seconding.
Okay.
Commissioners, could I clarify one thing? The riverine portion of North Merritt Island is really the area north of Hall Road. So if that makes a difference in your motion, then I would suggest that you take that into account. The area south of Hall Road has separate issues that are actually a bit different. And I don't think the riverine aspect of it is really pertinent to the discussion.
Commissioner Pritchett?
Yeah,
Oh.
Sorry, to be clear, then I would amend the motion to north of Hall Road, Madam Chair.
You know what, I'll go ahead and second it. Let's see how it goes.
Commissioner Pritchett? Okay. I'll call the question. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? Nay. I didn't hear Commissioner Smith. Okay. So motion fails. 2-3. Okay, Commissioner Lober, or Commissioner Pritchett's first, I'm sorry.
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. I just want to throw out, if someone were to make a motion to modify the compensatory storage rules, have the staff come back with that, I would second that.
Some options.
I think that's a great option to start with, and then we start getting county-wide ideas, because this isn't just a Merritt Island problem. So I think that would be an excellent start for tonight, as we're waiting to gather some more information.
Commissioner Lober?
Well, let me address that. I wasn't planning on speaking about that, but I think it needs to be done. In terms of adjusting it countywide, I don't know, and I would invite either Ms. Bentley or Mr. Denningoff to jump in. I don't know that we have an adequate scientific or technical basis to implement anything countywide. I think that needs to be looked at area by area. I think there's certain areas where, quite frankly, they may be riverine, and certain areas where they may be estuarine, and there may be areas that are a little bit more in the gray between the two, where it's not entirely clear. It may have features of both of those types of floodplains. That said, I would like to make a couple motions. First motion, and I hope this goes through, is to direct staff, Public Works in particular, or whatever staff may be delegated this, to put together a proposed moratorium to present to us at the next commission meeting, not 6 meetings from now. I'll work with them to whatever extent they're able to work with me to ensure that it's in keeping with what we've discussed this evening, to implement, pending the results of the drainage study, requirements for compensatory storage to account for those historic drain flows that have gone onto the land. And then we can certainly address this at the next commission meeting, determine if it's to everyone's approval, and if so, get it advertised and get this thing moving. I think it gets us moving in the right direction.
So that was a motion?
Yes.
I will second it.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Lober, second by Commissioner Tobias. Commissioner Smith?
Well, I've been listening to all this, and my head's about to explode. Estuary and river, whatever, and we not ordered a study so that we would have some answers? And we know that those answers are going to be in 2 years. So 1 year. So I have heard an awful lot of talking tonight about doing this and doing that. You know, guys, I remember when I was a little kid, and I've used it on my own grandkids, haste makes waste. I don't see that there's any hurry here to do anything. For me, facts are more important than emotion. And we've got a lot of emotion here, and I understand emotion. But I also understand facts. And the facts that we need are going to be presented to us when we get this study done. And then we'll have all the facts on the table, and then we can make decisions based on facts that will benefit these folks, and then we can deal with flooding in the rest of the county as well. So I think we're spending a lot of money for these facts. I think we need to wait for the facts before we make our decisions. So I'm not looking forward to vote yes on anything tonight.
Commissioner Pritchett?
Yeah, Commissioner Lober, I would just request that maybe you wait to next meeting and discuss this one more time, because I agree with that. We approved almost $500,000 for the study just for this area. So I don't think we're under any 2-week critical thing, and I just think we need to take a little pause and get a little bit of input back from community. Not that this isn't important. Please don't think I'm not saying this. But again, this isn't the only area with this problem. And so, we start with this. I promise you, I'm going to have 4 places in North Brevard expecting it, and Commissioner Isnardi has Indian Atlantic. I mean, this is just a countywide problem. And as far as modifying the compensatory storage rules, there's already rules in place. We probably need to just start with that and get some recommendations coming back. I think that I would like to maybe direct staff to come back with some recommendations. And as far as funding, I'm going to need them to come back and help show us with that too, sir. Because if you've already got it in your account for a couple of years and you just pull it in early, but then you understand what you might not be getting later, just so that you know, this accountant in me right now. Mm-hmm. But I think waiting at least a meeting on this is just a better strategy. I think it's a lot of information right now to just do this all in one night. So I would just request, sir, that you hold this off.
Commissioner Lober?
Well, I mean, there are a couple of ways that this could have been phrased. They could have phrased to direct them to put on the, not to put on the agenda, to simply go about advertising a moratorium and go that way. That would be perhaps the most impulsive, quickest way. But out of respect for the comments that I've heard from the other commissioners, I'm happy to have them put something together and bring it back. And I don't know that they're putting together a proposed moratorium is really all that different from what you're suggesting in terms of having them bring back options. It's not that when they put that together, we're therefore obligated to advertise it or to act on it if it's not something that meets with the commission's approval. So I would ask, because it is in keeping, at least by and large, with what you're suggesting, that you consider supporting the motion as it's been phrased, insofar as it concerns that area. As far as other areas in the county, including in District 1, if you have a concern in District 1 of this nature, it should be brought forward. I'm happy to support you and your constituents on it as well. And if there's something in D5, by all means, bring it forward. You'll have my support. I try to defer to folks with respect to issues that pertain to their districts exclusively as much as I reasonably can. And this is one which pertains exclusively to my district. And I'm not saying that anyone is treating it differently on account of that, but I would just ask that we have a little flexibility to allow staff to prepare at least a draft of what we could move forward with. So it's not just this next meeting, then we direct them to draft it, and now instead of being one meeting out, we're multiple meetings out. So it's something where if you don't like it, if we have a draft, we'll be in a position where we can modify what needs to be modified then and there and either move forward or strike it at that point. So I do respect where you're coming from, but I think my constituents need to see something happen.
Commissioner Pritchett?
Yes, sir. You like the way I wait on my light?
You do.
Thank you. As far, I know you do. You're very compassionate about the other districts, but I see everything in green and white. So trying to figure out the funds, but that's a whole nother strategy we got to work through. So that's something I have to look at with this is what we're doing. That's why I need the pause, because like tonight, I'm not really comfortable with the moratorium. Because again, I don't believe in the minority ruling the majority. I have a great struggle with that. So I think if you would just buy some time, it might give me some time to maybe, figure out. I have to research things before I do them. It would give me a little more time, but as of right now, I'm not comfortable even working towards a moratorium until I have information. So just in all fairness.
Commissioner Lober?
I want to work with you as much as I can. The one thing I would ask that would put me at least in a better place with this is if you assure me that, if you're ready to move the next meeting, we do everything within reason to expedite this so this doesn't drag any longer than need be. Because I know, I've been up in North Merritt Island. In fact, when I went up yesterday, and it certainly wasn't a tropical storm, I've got a little car that's low to the ground, and I had to meet my wife halfway from where she works to swap out to get a car that's higher off the ground because I was concerned I wouldn't be able to get back home from North Merritt Island with the car that I normally drive. So there is a sense of urgency up there. This is not something where I think the ideal answer is wait till the drainage study comes out. I think to implement something permanently, sure, let's wait till the drainage study comes out. But if there is a need now, which I believe there is, I will, out of respect for you and what you've suggested, I will withdraw my motion at the moment. But I really would ask staff to do everything within their power to expedite this, to get it, even if it's not in perfect form, ready for the very next meeting.
Commissioner Tobias?
This both could be accomplished if we waive the permission to advertise. If Commissioner Pritchett was able to sit down and get comfortable with this over the next 2 weeks. Normally we have that 2-week permission to advertise. We waive it on rare occasions as we did with the CSC. As you look forward through this, Commissioner Pritchett, will you please take that into consideration, and we could get this done on a expedited timeline.
Commissioner Lober?
And I would just echo that as well. If this is something that you're more comfortable with, I think that's a great way to expedite it so that we shave some time off. But again, I don't want to push you this evening if you're not comfortable with it. But when this comes back at the next meeting, I probably will be, if Commissioner Tobias doesn't beat me to the punch, moving to waive that item.
I'm just going to say, I know this is important, but this has been going on for 30 years, and now we're talking about waive an advertisement, which I'm fine with because I understand. I just don't understand the intensity of it now. This is not even Commissioner Lober's item. This is Commissioner Tobias, and it's completely different from where we were going. I want staff to bring back information, and if I'm comfortable with some of their options, or I'm comfortable with 2 of their options out of 10 of their suggestions on ways we can improve the drainage, whether that be through expediting his funding, getting him a new pump, pulling money out of reserves for that, whatever it takes. But, I have my own list for Indy Atlantic, which I'm sure you're tired of getting our emails and calls about as far as funding goes. But I think making any rash decisions doesn't help anybody. I know it feels good. Oh yeah, let's stop the. But again, you start putting properties. And I know this is not exactly what we're talking about at this very minute, but this is the agenda item. When you start talking about putting one house per 2.5 acres, there is no drainage system on that property at all. That's water sitting on a house that the elevation's as high as that builder can get it, which is going to cause more flooding. So I know it doesn't sound like that's the case, but here's our engineer saying the same thing, the same one Commissioner Tobias is using to talk about increasing the compensatory storage. And I like the idea of increasing the compensatory storage. I'm not even opposed to that. I think that's a great idea. I just think that we need to be armed with information. I trust that Mr. Denninghoff, is going to make his recommendation. He not only lives there, he knows the area, he's lived it, he knows how bad the flooding is in Merritt Island. And completely off topic, this is why I always said Merritt Island has a unique set of circumstances. It's a big area. You need to be incorporated. But that's a whole separate issue, because I think you would take better care of yourself if you were. But again, I'll get off my soapbox. So I want more information before I move to rush to do anything. And I want residents to have the information as well. So I'm not going to support anything that expedites it, because I don't see how this is an emergency, considering this is different from the item that's even on the agenda. The more armed I am with information, the more comfortable I feel supporting something. And I may be in Commissioner Lober or Commissioner Tobias or Commissioner Pritchett's camp on whatever recommendations but I want to be armed with all the information. I don't want to make a rash decision because it feels good or because it's political. So that's where I'm at. So I don't think you have the support to expedite it.
But that's, like I said,
Unless Commissioner Smith wants to expedite it.
No. Well, I don't think we're there at this point. I think this has to come back at the next meeting, and depending on where things are at, I think at that point, that's when the request is going to be made. There's not a request as of this moment to expedite anything, apart from having them come back with recommendations at the very next meeting.
Well, Commissioner Tobias suggested it. That's why I'm not comfortable with it.
Well, as I said, I withdrew the motion in deference to the other commissioners here, with the understanding that we'll have staff reports coming back, and folks will do what they need to in order to apprise themselves such that we can act on this at the next meeting.
And I want to help this area, but I want to be smart about it. I don't want to make a rash decision that doesn't help anybody. So it's not about playing favorites. It's not about not caring. It's about making sure we're making scientifically sound, sound decisions and not political ones. So I'm done. So do we have any motions to do anything other than to direct staff to bring back? I'm not sure where we're at with what motion.
I don't know if Mr. Denninghoff needs a motion beyond what we've already discussed.
Do you have to withdraw your motion that you made earlier?
I believe I already have.
Okay.
And if not, that's fine. I'll go ahead and do it now.
Okay.
But I think it's pretty clear in terms of the direction, but if you'd like a motion, I can put one together.
To be honest, I'm not sure what the direction is, other than...
Or would you like a beer at this point?
To come back with some information, more detailed information about Riverine versus Estuary, and yes. How that might apply on North Merritt Island and other locations within the county, perhaps, and then perhaps a prioritized list of the improvements that might remain to be funded on North Merritt Island to improve the drainage.
And compensatory storage.
Including compensatory storage, that's correct. As far as the code is concerned, the compensatory storage is linked to the Riverine floodplain.
Exactly.
And just one last, if I may.
Sure.
I know that Commissioner Tobias has taken the drainage tour, and I've taken the drainage tour, and probably quite a few folks sitting here. I know I'm looking at some folks I know that have gone there, have taken the drainage tour. If anyone on my right has not yet taken the drainage tour, please, I know it takes a few hours, but it's something where, regardless of how much you know about the situation, physically looking at it at boots on the ground level, you will learn more. And if folks are concerned about not being fully apprised as to what's going on, if you go, you're going to learn a lot more about that situation than anyone can tell you just standing here in a room that, doesn't have any pumps or any equipment or really the topography that you'd be looking at on the ground up there. So if there's any way y'all can make it up there, if you haven't yet, please look at that.
I took it when I was chair. I took it with Mr. Denninghoff. We went out in the rain and the wind, and it was during Hurricane Irma. So I had a up close and
That
personal
counts.
experience with all the water and all the rain.
Okay. So is it clear? Do we need a motion, Ms. Bentley?
As long as Mr. Denninghoff knows what he's supposed to be analyzing.
I think I am. I'm going to watch the tape of the meeting just to make sure.
Or give me a call and I'll see if I can get you brought up to speed again.
Then you'll need that drink. All right. Okay, we're going to take 10.